761 good people and good deeds plus, turn off reset. What happened? Klein instantly tensed up. He had experienced too many accidents in the past, and he knew that he easily found himself involved in beyonder matters. Upon encountering something similar, he couldn't help but subconsciously be on alert. It did resemble some form of post-traumatic stress disorder. After seriously watching Hazel Mock's figure disappear from the staircase, Klein sensed that she was only in a hurry and wasn't panicking. This means that she has the matter under control. Besides, Mocked is a member of Parliament of the House of Commons, a member of high society just below the nobles in the kingdom. There should be beyonders around protecting him. Yes, Earl Hall's eldest son is here too, so his bodyguards must be beyonders as well. Besides, St. Samuel Cathedral is only a 10-minute carriage ride from Buckland Street. If anything were to really happen, the Nighthawks, priests, and bishops would rush over. Unless one has made up their mind to sacrifice themselves, no one would create an accident at this ball. Klein gradually calmed down and had another guess regarding Hazel's situation. She was rushing to the third story to resolve the negative effects of the mystical item. The question Klein had asked de Rhodes previously was where he could obtain a mystical item which could steal the beyonder powers of others, and one of the answers he received was Hazel Mocked. Thinking back to their dance, Hazel's image rapidly reconstructed in Klein's mind with her different accessories as his focus. Hair ornaments, earrings, necklace, brooch, fishnet gloves. Which one could it be? Klein retracted his gaze and found himself thirsty. Hence, he picked up a cup of water and downed it. Just as he put down the cup, he saw his etiquette teacher, Wiana Heisen, approach him with a plate. This lady was dressed in a red dress, but she didn't look tawdry. She smiled at Dwayne Dantes and said, "I noticed that you don't enjoy drinking alcohol." "I've once missed an important matter as a result of drinking." Klein randomly fleshed up Dwayne Dantes' character as an experienced person with depth. Of course, he knew how to restrain himself. He didn't use his faceless powers to remove a finger to prove how determined he was when making that former oath. When Wiana heard that, she smiled and thought, "Your past is filled with mystery. This is fatally attractive to many young ladies." She didn't continue on the topic as she said, "I forgot to tell you that the problem my husband faced has been resolved." Klein picked up a cup of champagne and raised it. He then said with a smile, "This is something to be happy about. Congratulations." He didn't mention anything about him helping in secret. Wiana gave him a deep, penetrating look as she raised the cup of red wine in her hand. "Cheers." After clinking cups and taking a sip, Klein politely excused himself, put down his cup, and headed for the washroom. This wasn't because he wanted to head above the gray fog, but was solely due to the negative effects of death knell. He had drunk too much water and needed to relieve himself. When he walked out of the washroom, Klein looked up at the staircase that led from the second story to the third story. He found Hazel Mocked walking down with unhurried footsteps. She wore an unperturbed expression. Indeed, it wasn't a huge problem. It's likely a result of the negative side effects of the mystical item she possesses. I wonder what it is. Klein heaved a sigh of relief as he casually swept the dance floor. During the interlude between two songs, he walked over to a lady and invited her to a dance. With Dwayne Dantes' appearance and bearing, his invitation was undoubtedly accepted. With him dancing, eating, chatting, and eating again, the ball slowly came to an end as the guests bade farewell one after another. Having completed his mission of exchanging name cards, Klein did the same. However, he wasn't the first or last person to leave. The hall soon turned silent as Mamriana monitored the servants while they cleaned up the area. Meanwhile, she beckoned for her daughter, Hazel Mocked. "Mr. Dwayne Dantes' performance was better than I imagined. Many ladies had even asked me about him in private," Mamriana said in a veiled manner. "Hazel, what's your impression of him when you were dancing and chatting with him? You're a lot more mature than girls your age. I believe in your taste and judgment." She knew her daughter very well, and she had deliberately added the last sentence, otherwise, Hazel was unlikely to be interested in giving a detailed answer. Hazel wasn't that arrogant when facing her mother. she said after some thought. He's not very familiar with this circle, and he easily mentions topics that can be offensive, but he's very knowledgeable. Very knowledgeable. Ma'am Rihanna was slightly surprised as she repeated her daughter's words. With her understanding of Hazel, this was a rather good compliment. She couldn't help but be worried that her daughter had taken a liking to Dwayne Dantes. Hazel thinks little of the eligible bachelors around her because they are too young, inexperienced, and incapable? Dwayne Dantes happens to be the kind of man that girls who mature early like. Rihanna suddenly felt a little regret inviting the gentleman to the ball. She knew that with Hazel's personality, she might very well elope if she were to suffer any objection to her newfound love. Hazel seemed to sense her mother's thoughts and said without emotion, "I only like men who are sufficiently powerful." Phew. Rihanna silently heaved a sigh of relief as she was no longer worried about the problem from before. This was because Hazel was a girl who found lying beneath her. Late at night, Hazel got up from bed. With her night vision, she changed into clothes that facilitated movement. She climbed down from her bedroom's balcony and carefully avoided her family's bodyguards. She went all the way to the garden and came to the middle of Buckland Street. Not every sewer manhole allowed a human passage with vertical metal ladders. Hazel adeptly moved the manhole cover away and climbed down before closing the cover from underneath. Nearly 45 minutes after, she moved the manhole cover again and returned into the shadows of the street. At this moment, Hazel saw a shadow nimbly flip into a garden nearby. Unit 160. She read the corresponding address. It was none other than Dwayne Dantes' residence. On the manor's third story, Klein was once again awoken from his sleep due to his spiritual intuition. He had the urge to capture the infiltrator that disturbed his sleep and feed it to creeping hunger. This time, he directly opened his iron cigar case and released his wraith marionette. Senor, in his dark red coat, first walked into the full-body mirror before leaping over to the oriel window in his valet's room. He observed Richardson and saw the valet sit up as he looked at the door with fear and anxiety. The door silently opened as a shadow flashed in. Under the crimson moonlight, the infiltrator exposed brownish-yellow skin, a soft outline, and short curly black hair. He obviously hailed from the southern continent. With a gloomy cold aura, he stood by the door and looked at Richardson, saying in a deep voice, "Have you decided? Do not believe that you can attain your calm life by leaving. Inside of you flows the blood of death's subjects. You are destined to give up everything to restore God's glory. Think about your deceased mother. Think about the insults you once suffered. Do you wish that your child will grow up under the contemptuous looks of others, to be a servant of others forever? But, what can I do?" Richardson lowered his head as he said with great difficulty, "Wait for the mission." The infiltrator's voice turned gentler. Richardson didn't commit to an answer as he seemed to be struggling inwardly. As for the infiltrator, he didn't seem to care about his hesitation. He treated it as though Richardson had agreed, turned around, left the room, and traced his steps back. Death subject. Someone from the Numinous Episcopate, or another organization that's trying to restore Balaam? Having witnessed everything, Klein leaned back into bed and silently said, "What mission would they give Richardson? Steal my money to provide funds for the organization? Or will they create a terrorist incident at one of the balls of high society?" At that moment, the infiltrator had climbed down from the balcony, passed through the garden, and flipped over the perimeter fence made of steel bars. Suddenly, he saw a figure pounce over from his left. He dodged as he clenched his fist and threw a punch. Thud. The punch hit the black figure, but it pierced straight through. It was as though he had struck a shadow created by the street lamp. Meanwhile, he suffered a heavy blow to the back of his head as he fainted onto the ground. Hazel's figure immediately surfaced behind the infiltrator as she wore an excited expression. It was as though she had completed a successful scam. She quickly reined in her emotions as she maintained her arrogant demeanor. She turned to look at the black metal gates of 160 Buckland Street. This girl bent her back and held the infiltrator by the arm as she dragged him to Dwayne Dantes' doorstep. Immediately after that, Hazel let go of her left hand, cleaned up any traces, walked forward with her chin slightly lifted, and pulled the doorbell. Then, she quickly departed, heading straight to her home through the shadows in the street. And on a street lamp outside Unit 160, on the black metal gate was a piece of glass. It reflected a figure wearing a dark red coat and an old triangular hat. It had seen the entire process. How should I deal with this? Inside the room, Klein was stumped. He knew that Hazel was doing a good anonymous deed for her neighbor to finish off an infiltrator, but this way, if his butler were to make a police report, the matter would be investigated in detail, causing the matter to be transferred to the Nighthawks. When the time came, whoever struck the infiltrator unconscious would become an important question. If Klein was really an ordinary person, it wouldn't have mattered, he could allow the Nighthawks to carry out their investigation. However, not only was he a powerful Sequence 5 Beyonder, but he was also scheming to steal an item from behind Cheney's gate. He didn't wish for any external setbacks to spoil his plans, or else he would have to change identities once again. To be frank, his earliest solution was to find a way to terminate Richardson's services. However, what he had heard changed his mind a little. If I were to terminate Richardson's services, it would be equivalent to pushing him into the abyss despite his desire for a quiet life. It will force him to mix with those people. Unfortunately, Dwayne Dantes has a mission, otherwise, helping him in passing wouldn't be difficult. Klein sighed as he thought. 10 seconds later, the unconscious infiltrator suddenly stood up, cracked his neck, and hid in the nearby shadows. And at this moment, butler Walter had walked out of the house's main door after hearing the doorbell. At the gates, Walter used the light from the street lamps and discovered no one was outside through the gaps. The street was silent. For an instant, Walter suspected if he had heard wrong and that the doorbell hadn't rung. He composed himself, and he quickly walked to the servant quarters at the back of the compound. He woke up a few servants and got them to carry double-barreled hunting rifles to begin patrolling the main building so as to prevent any bandits or burglars from infiltrating. Walter didn't immediately get the police, because nothing had happened yet. The doorbell from earlier might have been a prank from a tramp. Meanwhile, under the nearby sewers, the infiltrator was holding on to the metal handles as he slowly headed down into the unlit area. He soon came to a halt, leaned back onto the moss-covered wall, and slowly slid down to sit down on the dirty ground. His eyes closed again as though he was still in an unconscious state. In front of him, a middle-aged man wearing a dark red coat and an old triangular hat instantly appeared. He was none other than Klein's marionette, Wraith Senor. Senor bent down, rummaged through the infiltrator's pockets and found 7 soldi and 11 pence, as well as tiny cloth bags containing different kinds of powders. Inside the room, Klein remotely controlled his marionette from dozens of meters away. As he identified the powder, he discovered that his theories were correct. They were all herbal powder in the death domain. And a portion of them could be used for spirit channeling. He was very likely to be a Beyonder from the corpse collector pathway that hailed from Balam. Even if he hadn't reached Sequence 7 spirit medium, it was very normal for him to prepare the corresponding herbal powders, essential oils, and extract. After all, these materials weren't only used for spirit channeling. Immediately, Klein controlled Senor to set up a ritual to pray to the Fool. Then, he went above the gray fog to respond, allowing Senor to complete what followed. After doing all of this, he returned to the real world and continued controlling Senor, allowing him to channel the spirit. Passing through a storm of glimmers, Klein saw the infiltrator's spirit. He appeared listless, blurry, and translucent. "What's your name? What faction do you belong to?" Senor asked with a deep voice. The infiltrator answered blankly, "Gadapos. I belong to the Black Skeleton Gang." Black Skeleton Gang. I believe it's a gang that's active around the border of East Borough and the dock area close to the Backland Bridge area. It's mainly filled with people of Balam heritage. Although they aren't as barbaric and boorish as this Manger gang, they aren't strangers to violence. As Klein recalled the intelligence he had previously gathered, he made Senor continue asking. "What do you mainly do? Why are you looking for Richardson?" Gadapos answered in a muddled state, "We are fighting for God. We were originally members of the Balam Nation Re-Establishment Society. We established the Black Skeleton Gang to grasp various intel and obtain funds. Apart from that, we also have another mission. It is to seek out any items related to death, and send it back to the southern continent. This time, we obtained verified information that in Earl Wolf's collection is a mask taken out from the Eggers family mausoleum. This family is a descendant of God. For this mask, we need to send someone to infiltrate Earl Wolf's household as a servant or infiltrate during one of the balls and banquets he hosts. And Richardson is an excellent choice. He has no history with any of the other organizations, and he's an experienced servant. The servants of nobles are often inherited. It's obviously not easy to infiltrate. Only short-term employments will be made if there's a sudden need for plenty of manpower. Speaking of which, there really is such a situation. At the ball today, a few ladies had mentioned that some nobles who are financially tight will sell lots of their lands and manors, and also dismiss nearly all their servants, leaving fewer than 10 to serve them, so as to barely maintain a decent lifestyle. When there are large-scale balls or banquets that require manpower, they would spend money to hire a bunch of temporary workers from the Family Servant Assistance Association to keep up a front. Also, Earl Wolf actually has a mask from the descendants of Death's family. I recall Mr. Azek's last name to be Eggers. Unfortunately, I don't wish to be disturbed by any accidents at the moment, otherwise, I might have come up with a way to help Mr. Azek obtain that mask. Klein mumbled silently and made Senor continue asking. How do you know Richardson? Gadapo said blankly, we got to know each other at a manor in East Balam. Back then, we were both slaves. Among the slaves, there are people who secretly spread the faith of death. Richardson, his mother, and I couldn't help but become believers of death in such a life. We secretly joined an organization that had a lot of influence among the slaves there. Later, Richardson's mother passed away from an illness, and he was brought to Backland, while I stayed in East Balam before I found an opportunity to escape. A few years later, I was sent to Backland, and I chanced upon Richardson. He actually forgot about his mother's death and the abuse he had once received. He forgot his faith towards God, and had his will eroded by what he called a peaceful life. To avoid me, he deliberately made mistakes and kept switching employers, but how could he have guessed that his former companion is no longer an ordinary human? Everyone has the right to choose as long as they don't harm others. However, Richardson and I are two different kinds of people. In the room, Klein closed his eyes and made Senor ask in a deep voice, what's the organization that is very influential among the slaves? Gadapos hesitated for a moment and said, the Eternal Life Society. Those who believe in death will obtain eternal life in the underworld once they leave the real world that's filled with pain and sorrow. Eternal Life Society. I'm aware of this. It's a branch of the Numinous Episcopate. As a former Nighthawk, Klein knew quite a lot about such matters. He continued controlling Senor to interrogate Gadapos, and he obtained plenty of information regarding the Eternal Life Society, East Balam Nation Re-establishment Society, and the Black Skull Gang, while confirming that Gadapos and his gang had their hands covered in the blood of the innocent. After finishing the spirit channeling and clearing up any traces, he waited 30 minutes before letting the wraith enter Gadapos's body, controlling him to climb out of the sewers and returning back into the shadows of the streets. And at this point, the servants in 160 Buckland Street, who were wielding double-barreled hunting rifles, were no longer as vigilant while doing their patrolling rounds. They seemed to believe that any latent danger had passed. Klein pretended as though he didn't notice anything as he continued sleeping in his master bedroom. However, he had already set up a ritual to summon and respond to himself. With Azek's copper whistle, the iron cigar case, and creeping hunger, he silently left his residence in the form of a spirit. He followed behind Gadapos and constantly maintained a distance of 80 meters. By using his marionette to possess this hostage, he made him circle to another street and board a rental carriage by the side of the road. About an hour later, Gadapos returned to the headquarters of the Black Skeleton Gang, a tiny house situated near the docks. There were plenty of firearms stashed away here, with several operatives that were sent from the East Balam Nation Re-establishment Society. They formed the upper ranks of the Black Skeleton Gang. Following the method that was agreed upon, Gadapos knocked on the door, and he said to a member who came towards him, "Richardson has submitted." "Very good." The member inattentively shot Gadapos a glance, made way for him, and gave him passage. Gadapos surveyed the area and found the high-yield explosives and a bunch of rifles stacked in the corner of the house. A few of the top brass of the Black Skeleton gang were gathered together, discussing something. "Gadapos, want a smoke?" The member from before handed him a cigarette. This was a cigarette fashioned to the preferences of the southern continent. They were made from dried tobacco leaves mixed with tiny amounts of herbs. Gadapos received the cigarette and casually picked up a box of matchsticks from the table, took out a few sticks, and lit them. Then, he threw the few burning matchsticks to the corner where the easily flammable explosives were. Everyone present looked at Gadapos with a dumbfounded look, momentarily at a loss as to what had happened. Rumble. On a public bench dozens of meters away, Klein sat there as the flames blazed behind him, a hot gust of air swarming out of the house. A few seconds later, Senor in his dark red coat appeared beside him, with some signs of being burned. The wraith held his hand to his chest and bowed before returning inside the gold coin inside the iron cigar case. "Unfortunately, I won't be able to pick up the Beyonder characteristics, otherwise, it wouldn't appear like an accident. It'll definitely be suspicious if the upper echelons of the Black Skeleton gang don't have any Beyonders." Klein silently sighed as he cleared any traces before ending the summoning and returning above the gray fog. The next morning, he got up and washed up as though nothing had happened. He then waited for his valet to bring in a change of clothes. Richardson entered in silence as he finished his work skillfully. Following that, he took a step back and bowed his head. "Sir, after serving you this week, I wish to resign." He typically received a weekly salary from housekeeper Tanaja. "Why?" Klein looked at himself in the mirror as he adjusted his vest. Meanwhile, he leisurely thought, "Not bad at all. You know how to resign by your own volition and not bring trouble to your employer." Richardson had already thought of an excuse. "I believe I'm lacking in ability to be a valet. At last night's ball, I realized how lacking I was when I was interacting with the servants of the other guests." Klein smiled. "Everyone begins with zero experience. Few grew up with experience. Consider it again, and give me your final answer tomorrow." "Yes, sir." Richardson didn't speak further as he took the initiative to leave the room. He went to the first floor to help his employer pick up the morning papers. During this process, he would always first flip through it and place the most interesting articles at the top. While flipping through, his gaze froze as he focused on an article. An explosion happened at 79 Durham Street in the Backland Bridge area. It's suspected to be related to the Black Skeleton gang. According to the police, all the upper echelons of the Black Skeleton gang died in this accident, including Lima, Morera, Gadapos. This? Richardson shook his head, suspecting that he was dreaming. 160 Buckland Street, inside the dining hall on the second story. Klein had just bitten into the buttered toast his servant had served him when he saw his butler walk in. Walter bowed and said, "Sir, a person of unknown origins pulled our doorbell last night. As it was already very late, I didn't wake you up, and instead got the servants to patrol the area with the double-barreled hunting rifles. If you so permit it, I'll visit the nearby police station to get them to reinforce the patrols on this street at night. To employ such a butler, there aren't any flaws aside from him being expensive." Klein nodded slightly and drank the fresh milk that had been delivered to him. "Very good." 39 Buckland Street, Member of Parliament Mock's house. Hazel entered the activity room on the second floor and saw her mother, Rihanna, chatting with the housekeeper. "What happened?" She pushed a lock of black-green hair to the back of her ear. Rihanna chuckled and said, "Someone rang Dantes' doorbell late last night." "A prank?" Hazel sat down. "No one knows. Anyways, Dantes' butler specially went to the police station this morning." Rihanna recounted what she had learned from her servant. Hazel nodded slightly and said, "It's best to have the police involved. But it's useless. No one knows who pulled the doorbell. Apparently, there wasn't anyone there. Rihanna laughed while shaking her head. Hazel was taken aback as she blurted out, "There wasn't anyone there?" "That's right. Dante's butler only seemed to ask the police to double their efforts on the night patrols on our street." "That's good news." As the wife of a member of Parliament of the House of Commons, and the daughter of a famous lawyer, Rihanna had very good relations with the police. "Not a single person," Hazel repeated softly before falling into silence. After a while, she left the activity room and returned to the third story. Along the way, she couldn't help but clench her fist and swing it as though she was testing something. In between her brows was a clear look of puzzlement. Inside his bedroom, Klein looked at the large pile of gold coins in front of him. All he saw was the shiny color of gold. There was a total of 4,000 pounds of gold coins. After a week of gathering funds, Admiral of Stars Katlia had finally completed the transaction for the Scales of Luck. Apart from the gold coins, she had also paid another 6,500 pounds in cash. To be honest, having a pile of gold coins is way more visually shocking than a pile of cash of the same size. As Klein sighed, he took out the 13 lone gold coins he received from Senor, from his pocket and threw it into the pile. After doing all of this, he took out the adventurer's harmonica and blew into it. Silently, Rionette Tinker appeared in front of him with the 4 blonde, red-eyed heads in her hand. "Ma'am, this is the first installment, a total of 4,013 pounds. Klein retracted his gaze from the pile of gold coins and looked at Miss Messenger. He was actually quite curious as to how Miss Messenger would move such a huge pile of gold coins. He remembered that she always used her teeth when collecting letters. "Very good. You still have 5,987. Rionette Tinker's heads said one after another. "There's no need to remind me." Klein forced a smile and said, "I'll try to gather the rest as soon as possible." Rionette Tinker didn't speak further as one of the heads tried hard to open its mouth. Suddenly, the area before her turned dark and deep. All the gold coins were sucked up by vortex-like surging water. In a few short seconds, the large pile of gold coins vanished. Rionette Tinker's 4 heads nodded at the same time before returning to the spirit world. "I still have 8,156 pounds and 5 lone gold coins. I can barely be considered a tycoon. I could actually afford any investment opportunities if they appear, and it won't just be me raising the price and mentioning it in passing. This way, I won't be suspected to be a cheat for the time being." "Heh, be a little optimistic. Perhaps the investment opportunity might allow me to earn back the money I spent. It's always fast to make money work for you." Klein silently exhaled as he cast his gaze out the window, forcing himself to enjoy the thinly fogged streets. At night time in the East Borough, the surrounding area was pitch black due to the few street lamps available, along with many of them being damaged. It was as though there were countless monsters and criminals lurking within. Xiao Dericha wore a hooded cloak, turned into a small alley, and came outside to what seemed like a dilapidated house. This was the new gathering in East Borough she had previously mentioned to Furs. Xiao wasn't in a rush to knock on the door with the agreed-upon signal. She first looked down to check her attire. Unlike how she usually dressed, she wore a pair of long boots. They didn't look odd, but Xiao knew very well that the soles were very thick. She had stuffed plenty of things inside, allowing a person to magically appear taller. And this effectively hid Xiao's greatest characteristic. Feeling assured by the presence of her triangular blade, Xiao pulled her hood up and knocked on the door with the signal. Soon, she was led into an activity room inside as she randomly found a spot to sit down. After the participants had mostly arrived, the host of the gathering finally walked in. He was of medium build, with a height of about 1.75 m. He wore a black classical robe, a pointed mage hat, with a brass mask on his face. He gave off an ancient and mysterious vibe. Rather dark skin, but it's not exactly brown. He resembles someone from Fainapotter or Desi Bay. But I can't be sure. It might be a tan. He has raven black curly hair. This does match my first guess. Xiao sized him up as a sheriff. The man in the brass mask looked around the room before laughing deeply. You can call me Mr. X. Mr. X. Xiao couldn't help but twitch the corners of her mouth. After becoming an outer circle member of MI9, she had learned quite a bit of the situations regarding the secret organizations, and that included the Aurora Order. Therefore, she knew very well that the oracles of the Aurora Order used alphabets as their code names, and they enjoyed addressing themselves as Mr. or Ma'am. And from her point of view, to address themselves in front of others in such a manner was obvious exposure of their identity and background. After all, the members who participated in these gatherings were mostly beyonders who were lacking in knowledge. Isn't he afraid that others would report him? It's no wonder the gentleman from MI9 said that the Aurora Order is filled with lunatics, that there's no way to understand their actions with the logic of the average person. Ever since Mr. A vanished, there have been a few gatherings in Backland that had impersonators, or gatherings that were hosted by his associates for their own benefit. The hosts were quickly reported and ended up being arrested. It's not necessarily the case that Mr. X is from the Aurora Order. Perhaps, he's just like the others. Xiao retracted her observing gaze and silently watched the gathering continue. She seldom reported matters, because she had experience as an unaffiliated beyonder. She knew it wasn't easy to survive in this world with such identities, so long as there wasn't any accidents, she wouldn't provide such intel to MI9. If it's confirmed that he's an oracle of the Aurora Order, I'll report him. These people are all lunatics. They will bring about extreme danger. As Xiao thought over the matter, she watched the others exchange information and complete trades. She didn't participate much in it, firstly because there wasn't any information or item of interest, and secondly, she was saving up for her interrogator potion. After the end of the gathering, she returned to her residence at Cherwood Burrow. Xiao saw Furs wearing a face mask that was said to be able to moisturize faces as she lay there leisurely reading. How was it? How was that gathering? Furs asked, pretending as though she wasn't interested. Xiao threw her cloak to the side and said, there were quite a number of participants, and there were quite a number of items as well, but they were mostly for low-sequence beyonders. No one will offer anything good at the first gathering, Furs said as she lowered the novel in her hands. Yeah. Xiao nodded and said, the organizer of the gathering calls himself Mr. X, but no one knows if he's related to Mr. A. Mr. X. A suspected Aurora Order oracle. Could he be Louis Veen? Furs's attention was caught as she languidly leaned back and asked, what does he look like? He wore a mask. Xiao rolled her eyes at her. Do you think I have the ability to see through an obstacle? No. I mean his build. Furs had seen Louis Veen's full figure thanks to her teacher, Dorian Gray, and knew his characteristics. As a sheriff, Xiao easily restored Mr. X's appearance and asked out of puzzlement, regardless if he's related to Mr. A or not, isn't he worried that he'll be reported for having such a name? After Furs heard Xiao's description and saw the portrait she made with her sheriff powers, she was delighted. There was a high chance that Mr. X was the traitor of the Abraham family, Louis Veen. He's not afraid of being reported because he's a traveler. He can calmly escape no matter what happens. If the official organizations were to use their experience like how they dealt with Mr. A, there's really no way they can restrain him. Furs silently mumbled. She stopped talking about the topic and switched to something else. After Xiao went to take a bath, she hurriedly used her powers as an astrologer to ask her spirituality, and she stacked Louis Veen's image with Mr. X's image before obtaining the answer that they were one and the same. It's really him. Furs stood up as she paced about in excitement and glee in the living room. Her first thought was to report this to the various major churches, and also include the tip-off that the target had the powers of a traveler. Following that, she recalled her prior attempt at hiring Mr. World to assassinate Louis Veen. Regardless, I should first ask Mr. World if he's free to take on this mission. I can't offend him. Upon recalling everything that Mr. World had done, Furs couldn't help but shiver. After making up her mind, she first checked that Xiao was having a bath and wouldn't come out anytime soon before praying to Mr. Fool. Please tell Mr. World that the Aurora Order's oracle, Louis Veen, has appeared, and there's a high probability that he's a traveler, codenamed Mr. X. Klein was returning from St. Samuel Cathedral to Buckland Street on a four-wheeled carriage when he heard the stacked illusory pleas. A female. It's nothing urgent. All he did was make a rough judgment and didn't immediately head above the grey fog to respond. Sweeping his glance at the street lamps which were dispelling the darkness, Klein retracted his gaze and raised the white porcelain with gold rims to take a sip. Beside him, Richardson noticed this and said after mustering his courage, "Sir, I've thought it through. You're very right. Everyone starts with zero experience. Few grow up with experience. Thank you for giving me this chance to grow." After confirming that Gadapos and gang were dead, he was finally at ease as he began considering his professional career. Switching employers repeatedly in a short period of time was a stain on a servant's record. Once he resigned from Dwayne Dantes' employ, Richardson believed that it would be difficult for him to continue being a valet. This would be extremely damaging for him. This was not only because a valet's annual salary was at least £25, and was way better than any non-management jobs. It was comparable to a lady's maid, and being a valet gave one the greatest opportunity of becoming a butler. By following their male or female employers and helping them in all kinds of trivialities, being their mouthpiece and assistant would allow them to build up their skills. It would allow them to grasp all the traits needed for being a butler and, as a result, become their employer's confidant. As long as there was a chance, one could easily be made a land steward, butler assistants or deputy butler, as they were slowly promoted to a butler. Richardson did yearn for a peaceful life, but this didn't mean that he was willing to be a servant his entire life. Without a doubt, he wished to rely on his hard work to earn more and gain a higher standing. And becoming the butler of a wealthy family was his ultimate goal. "It's not too late to realize that now," Klein replied with a smile, consenting to Richardson's retention. After returning to 160 Buckland Street, he instructed housekeeper Tanaja to prepare supper for him at 11:30 as he headed to the third story where he took off his coat and entered the bathroom. At that moment, the bathtub had already been heated to an appropriate temperature by a maid 5 minutes ahead of time. Klein wasn't in a rush to take his bath, as he went above the grey fog to determine who had prayed to him. Mr. X. Traveler. Miss Magician is rather efficient. Without realizing it, she has matured quite well. Klein muttered to himself. After some serious consideration, he conjured the world Gehrman Sparrow and made this fake person pray amidst the veil of the grey fog. Give me the time, location, and provide more information. Only then will I take action. Klein's idea was very simple. He found a traveler's powers rather useful, but it was difficult for Dwayne Dantes to have a period of prolonged absence from Buckland Street, or stay in his room all the time. It would be fine if Miss Magician could provide detailed and reliable intel, allowing him to carry out the assassination once. But if she were to get the world to slowly gather information bit by bit, there was no way he could do it, as it affected his own plans. Soon, Furs gave a reply. I'll try to gather it as quickly as possible. As the location and timing for Mr. X's next gathering hadn't been confirmed, all she could do was patiently wait. After settling this matter, Klein returned to the real world, took off his clothes, and placed himself into the bathtub. The warm water enveloped him as he closed his eyes in comfort. He felt that the fatigue that plagued his body and mind were being washed away bit by bit. During this period of time, he had been to St. Samuel Cathedral a few times to listen to Bishop Electra's explanation of the revelation of Evernight. He had grasped the looks and characteristics of another two keepers, but he hadn't seen any repeated sightings, preventing him from determining the schedule of the keepers. And doing such acts would similarly bring him trouble. Klein opened his eyes as he looked at the steam above him, sighing inwardly. The first investigation should be coming soon. A person who often entered St. Samuel Cathedral's interior would likely be investigated by the Nighthawks, and with his origins still an unknown, such an investigation was almost necessary. If there aren't any investigations, it would be a serious case of negligence for the Nighthawks. Klein slowly exhaled. In the basement of St. Samuel Cathedral, Leonard slowly walked out of a quiet room. His green eyes had a tint of strange black water as countless illusory bubbles and ripples appeared and disappeared. Not bad. You're already a soul assurer and are almost catching up to me. Standing in the corridor was Daily Simone as she congratulated him in a self-deprecating manner. She was still wearing her hooded black robe, with blue eyeshadow and blush. She had quite an uncanny sense of beauty. When Leonard looked at this familiar lady, he found her bearing even colder than before. There seemed to be countless shadows hidden around her, in layers that went deep and felt cold. Clearly, I'm still very far from you. With your condition, you should be able to advance to gatekeeper, right? Leonard didn't act too casual in front of Daly, speaking rather formally. This was because if he attempted to make any jokes, the one who would eventually be left blushing in embarrassment would definitely be him instead of the lady. Gatekeeper was sequence 5 of the death pathway. I was ready 2 months ago, Daly said without concealing anything, her expression slightly warped. Leonard roughly understood what she meant as he nodded slightly. You haven't contributed enough? Daly curled her lips immediately. That's right. It's like I'm already in bed with everything in place, only to realize that there aren't any condoms at home. Worst of all, it's late at night, and most of the stores around the neighborhood have closed for the day. What an amazing analogy. Leonard didn't think it was right of him to respond as he said with a smile, you can choose to handle certain cases. Without giving Daly a chance to speak, he pointed at the other end of the corridor. Captain Soest is still waiting for me to report on my advancement. Daly didn't say a word as she watched him leave. By the time his back disappeared around the corner, this lady's expression seemed to turn to drift as she muttered softly, Captain Soest. In the room where Leonard's Red Gloves team was temporarily stationed in, Soest, who had just become a spirit warlock, saw his desultory subordinate walk in as he casually threw a dossier over. Very good. You've already advanced. I'll congratulate you later. First, investigate this target's dream. It was already late at night, but for the Nighthawks who were mainly staffed with sleepless, it was no different from day. They even felt stronger at night. Isn't this something the local Nighthawks do? Leonard received the dossier and asked in passing. They've recently been swamped with cases and are lacking in manpower. They've requested our help, Soest explained without much care. Leonard didn't ask further as he looked down and flipped through the dossier. The first thing that he caught sight of was a photograph, and the middle-aged gentleman on it had given him a deep impression. Dwayne Dantes. Leonard's pupils instantly constricted. He knew this man, aware that this person was an undying monster who had survived since the 4th epoch. He was at least a saint or even stronger. Furthermore, he knows my secret and old man's identity. Leonard instinctively raised his hand to rub his temples. Captain Soest, I just advanced, and my spirituality is a little out of control. Is that so? Only then did Soest realize that he might have made a mistake. He hurriedly turned to look at another red glove and said, Albert, you do it. Albert was a man in his 30s. His hair was slightly blonde, and his skin was pale. He didn't look too healthy. Leonard heaved a sigh of relief as he handed the dossier over to him. At this moment, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. Would Albert suffer any negative effects if he were to enter the undying monster's dream? At that moment, he felt a little regretful. He believed that he should have done it himself. At the very least, he knew the level of danger and had faced him before. It wouldn't result in him provoking him. Dwayne Dantes likely won't do anything to Albert. If he has any excessive reaction and causes anything abnormal to happen to Albert, he would immediately expose his problems to us. And with our church's strength and Backland's situation, there's no way he can leave the city alive. Leonard quickly calmed down, believing that Dwayne Dantes would use a milder manner to avoid the dream investigation. He pulled over a chair and sat beside Albert. Although he appeared like he was reading the papers without much thought, he was constantly watching him to prevent any accidents from happening. 160 Buckland Street, inside the master bedroom. Klein suddenly woke up in his dream, aware that someone had come. The investigation of the Nighthawks? As he mumbled, he surveyed the area and found himself in the half-open room. Following that, he heard knocks on the door. "Come on in." Klein tried hard to make his voice sound like a dreamy murmur. The doorknob twisted as the door opened. A thinly built blond man dressed in a black trench coat walked in. He was none other than the Red Glove, Albert. "I'm a superintendent from the Backland Police Department." Albert casually showed proof of his identity and sat opposite Klein. "How may I help you, officer?" Klein got into character. He knew that due to the influence of a nightmare, he needed to appear normal. Albert conjured a stack of papers and began reading them softly. "Dwayne Dantes. Male. Hails from Desi County." He repeated all the intelligence that had been gathered and asked, "Is this set of information legitimate?" "Partially, but some of them are fake," Klein replied honestly. "The only partial truths are probably male and single." Meanwhile, he was making self-deprecating comments. Albert was pleased that he had made progress so quickly as he asked with a deadpan expression, "Which of these are fake?" Klein was already prepared for that as he pretended to recall. "Most of my wealth doesn't come from mining, but from adventuring in the southern continent." He fabricated a story from Anderson's description of West Balam about how a commoner earned his wealth by relying on his eloquence, intel, experience, and guts in an area that conflict often happened between Lone and Intis. This story wasn't considered very detailed, and it was mainly an outline. The main goal was to make the Nighthawks believe that Dwayne Dantes wasn't a beyonder, but just an ordinary person with a sense of adventure and risk. Such stories of people getting rich were common in Lone. After Klein was done, Albert asked a few targeted questions according to his recount, to ensure that the details matched up. Without a doubt, he obtained a satisfactory answer. "Thank you for your cooperation. Have a great dream." Albert smiled as he got up and bowed. Then, he used his nightmare powers to influence Dwayne Dantes once again. It would make him have a vague recollection that he had such a dream when he woke up, but he wouldn't be able to recall the specifics. After doing all of this, he turned to head for the door, turned the doorknob, and left the dream. Indeed, the Nighthawks placed too much trust in nightmare powers. "If I were to be the one leading this investigation, I would definitely design a series of questions that attack the matter from different angles ahead of time, and then do cross-referencing to find any loopholes. The best method is to enlist Miss Justice's help in creating a set of professional psychological questionnaires and get the target to finish it in the dream. If he were faking something, the psychological state and the image he wishes to project would definitely show contradictions from different evaluations. This is unless he's also a psychological expert and can spot the true goals of each set of questions." Klein leaned back into the sofa and cast his gaze out the window. In the darkness, the street lamp's glow appeared dim and pale, illuminating the surroundings in a gloomy silence. Klein silently observed for a few seconds before he curled his lips and gave a self-deprecating smile. And in the basement of St. Samuel Cathedral, Leonard first heaved a sigh of relief after he saw Albert wake up normally and heard his report. He felt even more fearful of the undying monster from the fourth epoch. City of Silver. Lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating every street. Derek Berg walked out of his house with the axe of Hurricane in his possession as he headed for the Twin Towers that was north of the city. Along the way, he met several residents of the City of Silver. They were either busy, sending their children for general education lessons, or patrolling every corner in groups. It was to prevent anyone from turning into an evil spirit after dying from an accident at home and being without a relative to end their lives. The existence of these people made the City of Silver appear lively, and from time to time, Derek could hear the laughter and cheers from little children. He couldn't help but recall the days in Afternoon Town. The number of humans he met every day had numbered about 20, and most of the time, they needed to stay in a garrison building. Outside were monsters that lurked in houses under the cloak of darkness. They were eradicated again and again, but they would appear time and time again from unknown places. Every team member from the expedition felt a sense of helplessness towards this, as though there was no way of gaining true safety. They could never feel at ease with the need to go all out at any time. There was no chance for them to relax at all. No ordinary creature would wish to maintain such states of high stress and vigilance for prolonged periods of time. Therefore, in regards to that, the City of Silver had already developed a rotation system. It didn't take much time for the first expedition team to go from Afternoon Town back to the City of Silver, but there was the unavoidable quarantine and relaxation period. It was only today that Derek had managed to adjust himself to a mental state which he believed he could withstand the negative effects from advancing. He had previously reported to Chief Colin Iliad that he had obtained the potion formula to notary, and he was allowed to use this discovery to exchange for the corresponding Beyonder ingredients, feathers of a spirit-packed bird. As for the items he owed the moon, he had obtained them from patrolling Afternoon Town's surroundings and had passed them to him with Mr. Fool's help. After advancing, I'll be qualified to select a mystical item for non-high sequence Beyonders. Derek felt a little expectant as he sped up his pace, and arrived at the Twin Towers. Although the material warehouse and the mystical items were all in the spire where they were watched by the 6-member council, Derek's goal was the steeple, because that was where he could exchange his contribution points for items. Just as he was about to enter the steeple, he felt his spiritual perception trigger. He subconsciously looked up at the spire, and he saw a woman in a black, purple-patterned robe standing behind a window, looking down at him. She had silver-grayish hair, light gray eyes, and a beautiful face. She was none other than one elders of the 6-member council, Shepherd Lovia. When their eyes met, Lovia's gaze seemed to penetrate his soul, but her expression remained the same. She even nodded slightly as though she was greeting him. "She's not greeting me, but the person behind me." Suddenly, Derek came to a realization. This was from the experience he slowly accumulated under the guidance of the Tarot Club. He nodded in response as he retracted his gaze without any signs of abnormality. He then unhurriedly entered the steeple. At night, in a private harbor in Byam, the Golden Dream, with its strange main cannon in the middle, docked by the side of the harbor. Danitz carried the local specialties that the Resistance had given him as he waved at them with a beaming smile while he headed up the gangway to the deck. He had been leading an extremely comfortable life in recent times. As an envoy who sent arms, food, and small amounts of Beyonder ingredients, he received quite good treatment. He either ate sumptuously or enjoyed himself by hunting and bragging. He was even invited to watch the ritual in which the sea god blessed his believers. After witnessing all of this, he suddenly came to a realization. Byam, or perhaps all the colonies, would eventually embroil themselves in an intense conflict. It was something that wouldn't ease with decades or even a century. Therefore, Danitz decided to sell most of his properties in Byam, leaving behind only one piece of property. He then found a chance to buy properties in the Intis capital, Trier, and the Lone capital, Backland, as well as extremely idyllic and peaceful villages. I can also take the opportunity to return to Elima town and visit the old man and mom. Yes, I can buy one less house and get them a vineyard. Danitz waved passionately at the Resistance once again. He then puffed up his chest and said smugly to Flowery Bow-Tie Jodson, "Where's Captain? I need to report to her on the recent developments." Jodson skeed in contempt. "She's obviously in the captain's cabin." Meanwhile, he lampooned inwardly, "This fellow is becoming more and more arrogant after establishing ties with Gehrman Sparrow. However, that crazy adventurer is really terrifying. He actually managed to hunt Admiral of Blood." Heh. Danitz scoffed as he walked with a provocative gait and entered the cabin where he met Vice Admiral Iceberg Edwina Edwards. He instantly stopped his provocative look as he smiled. "Captain, I've completed the mission." "Details?" Edwina put down the book in her hand as she asked. Danitz was already prepared as he gave a detailed description of what had happened recently while exaggerating his importance. When he was done, he said, "Captain, I met Gehrman Sparrow, and he got me to ask you if there have been any abnormalities with elvish songster Ciatas's corpse and that golden wine cup." Edwina didn't answer him directly as she walked to a corner in the captain's cabin. Sitting there was a black wooden chest. The Golden Dream was setting sail for Sonia Island, so Ciatas's and Mobit's remains remained on the ship. They were stored by Edwina in a specially prepared chest. bending one knee in genuflection, Edwina opened the wooden chest, allowing the interlocked remains to see the light of day. The mostly squashed golden wine cup was held silently in a bony palm without any abnormal signs. "There's nothing abnormal," Edwina gave the conclusion. Danit shot a glance and memorized the answer, preparing to report this to the mighty fool once there wasn't anyone around, so that he could forward the message to the lunatic, Gehrman Sparrow. "Nothing abnormal?" Above the gray fog, Klein frowned slightly, feeling a mixture of puzzlement and ease. According to his theory, there was a high chance that there was a problem with the golden cup. To have nothing abnormal happen to it had exceeded his expectations. However, he also liked the answer. This was because he didn't wish for Ciada's and Mobit's eternal slumber to be disturbed. Perhaps it needs other additional catalysts? Heh, let's hope that never happens. Klein muttered to himself before casting his gaze onto the junk pile where Grozel's travels was. As he temporarily didn't have any intention of entering the sea of collective subconscious, along with his recent focus being on the Antigonus family's notebook, he had delayed his plans of searching the book world a second time. Phew. Klein exhaled, retracted his gaze and prepared for this week's tarot gathering. 3 p.m, Backland time. Dark red beams of light shot up along the two sides of the long mottled table, materializing into different blurry figures. As usual, Audrey was in a good mood, or perhaps in a better mood than usual. This was because her brother, Hibbert Hall, had sent a telegram informing her that the purchase of the Backland Bike Company's 10% shares was completed for a total of £12,000. Furthermore, she didn't need to rush back to Backland to sign any documents. Before Hibbert set off, she had signed a letter of authorization while under the witness of 2 lawyers. All she needed to do now was wait for everything to be over before signing a letter of confirmation for her brother. Audrey curled up the corners of her lips as she stood up and said to the figure sitting at the end of the bronze table who was concealed by grey fog. "Good afternoon, Mr. Fool. May Mr. Fool bless me. I hope there will be clues to the fruit of an illusory chime tree today." Immediately after that, she began praying in silence. After exchanging greetings and taking their seats, Katlia didn't let down Klein's expectations. Once again, she lowered her head without daring to look straight at him. "Mr. Fool, there are 3 pages of Emperor Rozel's diary this time. Has that Queen Mystic still not found the clues to why Emperor Rozel was assassinated? She's still providing diary pages through Mam Hermit. What a pity, I've recently been in the fief, and I haven't had much contact with the psychology alchemists. I can't even obtain new diary pages. I'll head over to the Relic Search and Preservation Foundation after a few days to take a look. Perhaps they might have found something." Audrey listened in curiosity. The fool Klein chuckled. "Very good. You can consider your request. In fact, I know that Queen Mystic has already given you the question. I wonder what she's doing in Backland." Klein's mind started to wander. Soon, Katlia conjured the 3 diary pages and handed it to Mr. Fool. Knowing that the diary pages specially selected by Queen Mystic contained rather important information, the fool Klein focused his attention and cast his eyes on the yellowish-brown goatskin in his hand. September 11th. Ever since I became an angel, I've had the feeling that I've had my identity disassociated. In my heart, in my soul, and in the depths of my mind, there's ultimately a voice urging me, influencing me, and creating an uncontrollable sense of coldness, bloodthirstiness, cruelty, and craziness. This doesn't stem from the external world or an influence from a god of the same pathway. I can clearly sense that it comes from one's genes, the collective subconsciousness of humanity from generation after generation. It stems from the Beyonder characteristic itself, and not from the remnant's psychological influences. It makes me have a strong desire to hunt and kill. It makes me want to devour all the living beings around me with Beyonder characteristics. It requires me to spend a lot of effort to resist it. Even if I've already acted and digested the potion, it doesn't seem to improve. It's no wonder that Mr. Dorr said that rationality is temporary, but madness is eternal. September 28th. I haven't written a diary entry in ages. In the past half a month, I seemed to see myself being replaced by a stranger. Bit by bit, I turn cold and terrifying. Even my daughter, Bernadette, can only allow me to show her minute amounts of fatherly love. Very, very tiny amounts. Just as I was about to go mad, I seemed to hear countless praises. They were from my subjects, people who had benefited from my reformations. They are the believers who view me as the son of steam. They praise me with great acclaim. They erected statues of me, write stories for me, and have created songs and poems for me. Their voices seem like a ship's anchor that helps me secure myself in place. I began to have the ability to resist that desire and that roar within me. Bit by bit, I walked out of it as I once again possessed the normal feelings of a father, a husband, and a man. Just sequence 2 alone causes such changes. At sequence 0, at the level of a true god, how terrifying would it be to resist that madness? Perhaps they also need an anchor so as to resist the beyonder characteristics and the strong inclination to lose control, the urges buried deep in the collective subconscious. I probably understand why they establish churches and why they want to spread their faith, to write stories for their faction's saints and leave legends for their corresponding angels. But why do they not have any anthropomorphic form other than symbols? I can't understand it. I'll try asking Mr. Dorr in the future. He seems to know a lot in regards to the domain of deities. If he had been released back then, there might very well be an additional deity today. September 29th. After rereading yesterday's diary entry, I recalled the corresponding rituals of my sequence 4, sequence 3, and sequence 2. They clearly had hints of madness and cruelty, akin to the kinds held by antagonists in novels. A sequence pathway might very well be a path destined to be crazy and filled with despair. And this is the only path for humans to obtain extraordinary strength. How laughable and ironic it is. We strive to save ourselves, only to better destroy ourselves? The first page's content left Klein's heart heavy and repressed. The Roselle who had written those words was no longer an ordinary person, but someone who had become an angel, someone who had joined the Twilight Hermit Order, and someone who had seen the blasphemy slate. His understanding of the mysterious world and beyonder characteristics far exceeded him, but he was even more pessimistic than him. He seemed to believe that the world's origins were innately warped, crazy, and destined for destruction. However, the 7 deities have apparently found a way to maintain their rationality. Ordinary humans aren't without any use. Their cognition and their spirituality put together can help a deity anchor their original image, retaining their memories and reason that they had accumulated for years. This can be inferred from Roselle's own experiences. However, why would the 7 deities abandon their anthropomorphic images and use sacred emblems as a form of abstraction? This doesn't match my theories. I can't understand why. Klein didn't waste any time as he flipped to the next diary page. December 5th. Night of the blood moon. I conversed with Mr. Dorr. Like every time prior to this, he would always make a request to get me to help him return to the real world, but he doesn't overly insist on it. Furthermore, he would randomly answer some of my questions. Haha, it's like he is playing a game, trying hard to raise my affection towards him. But unfortunately, I'm sorry, I've already sealed off that option ahead of time. As I already knew of the legends of the Kings of Angels, I mainly asked Mr. Dorr about the level of strength that the Kings of Angels have, knowing the fact that I had nothing to lose by asking him that question. Mr. Dorr said that some of the Kings of Angels accommodated the uniqueness, while others had consumed 2 sets of sequence 1 potions. It could also be both. The word accommodate is used in an odd manner. I had asked him about it, but Mr. Dorr didn't directly answer me. All he said was that if one was unable to accommodate the uniqueness, then the uniqueness was a burden instead of an aid to a sequence 1 angel before they held the ritual to advance to sequence 0. It's understandable. It's akin to using a grade 0 sealed artifact. The negative effects are often terrifying, and the uniqueness must definitely be even more exaggerated. I also asked which Kings of Angels had accommodated their uniquenesses, and similarly, Mr. Dorr didn't give a direct answer. He only said that Amon and Adam make all the angels feel a sense of envy, because they were born with a uniqueness and didn't need to consider the problem of accommodation. From another point of view, does it mean that Amon and Adam's state is equivalent to having consumed a sequence 1 potion and the uniqueness? As expected of the Creator's sons. That Creator, who's also known as the ancient sun god, was actually so powerful that he could pass on a uniqueness to each of his 2 sons, as well as sequence 1 beyonder's characteristics. Was he trying to purify himself to eliminate any unneeded interference? Then, does Mr. Door also accommodate a uniqueness, and also possibly have even consumed 2 sequence 1 potions? I didn't ask, because I knew he definitely wouldn't answer me. During the conversation, Mr. Door warned me not to directly say out Adam's full name, otherwise, it would be detected and the conversation would be discovered. I had an inkling why as I laughingly asked him that didn't he just say Adam's full name? Mr. Door said it didn't matter. This is because the Apprentice Pathways Sequence 4 is called Secret Sorcerer. It has the meaning of maintaining secrecy, and although it's inferior to the Servant of Concealment, it's enough for him to block any detection at his level. I asked another few questions regarding the deities, but Mr. Door didn't answer. All he said was that when I had the ability and opportunity, I could head above the moon to take a look. I would then understand many things. This is somewhat in line with some of my previous thoughts, but I'm suspecting if he is luring me there to get a chance to return to the real world. After all, his appearance each time is related to the moon. As long as Mr. Door appears, there will be plenty of information, usually covering an entire page. His explanation of the level of strength that kings of angels have does match my theories. The generalized meaning of king of angels implicitly refers to a quasi-deity who exceeds sequence 1 by using a variety of means, but they have yet to reach the level of a sequence 0. This includes accommodating the uniqueness or consuming additional sequence 1 potions. The simplified meaning of King of Angels will point out to the Creator who the City of Silver worships, the 8 kings of all the angels that are ruled by the ancient sun god. Of course, they must also fulfill the general definition. Thoughts rapidly flashed through Klein's mind. As for Roselle's theory about the ancient sun god, he was in strong agreement. He believed that the Creator who the City of Silver worshipped had reclaimed too many authorities of the ancient gods, causing him to show signs of chaos and insanity. Hence, he decisively gave birth to 2 sons to eliminate a portion of the waste. To put it simply, Amon and Adam are freebies that come with drinking potions. From the looks of it, Angel of Imagination, Adam, clearly possesses the uniqueness of the spectator pathway. He is likely the mysterious leader of the Twilight Hermit Order. Since ancient times, he has been interfering with the direction of the times in order to revive his father. I wonder if he has advanced to sequence 0. Even if he hasn't, the number of angels the Twilight Hermit Order can mobilize probably exceeds my imagination. Oh, Secret Sorcerer actually has the meaning of keeping secrets, as well as the implications of concealment. Klein instantly recalled the symbol on the back of the Fool's Chair. It was the pupil-less eye, a symbol representing secrecy, and the contorted lines that represented change. He quickly reined in his thoughts and flipped to the 3rd diary page. November 28th. I dreamed of Grimm again. He was the smartest among my subordinates, but unfortunately, he died in the fog sea due to some unknown infection while exploring that nameless island. He didn't even leave a child behind. Back then, I knew that the nameless island hid secrets with unimaginable danger, but due to my lacking strength, all I could do was hold back. The dream this time is likely a result of my spirituality reminding me that I can explore that island, grasp its secrets, and completely resolve Grimm's matter. November 29th. I summoned 3 subordinates, and with Benjamin Abraham's help and some searching, I finally found that nameless island again. I didn't directly enter, and I decided to rest for a day along its periphery. Edward said that he also often dreams of Grimm, feeling a deep sense of guilt for not having managed to save him back then. This is not your responsibility, but my problem. That was what I said to Edwards because I'm their leader. November 30th. We ventured deep into the island. Existing here were beyonder creatures that large sources of data claim that they have gone extinct. They gathered there without any conflict, as though they were consecrating something. This bunch of beyonder creatures without any intelligence appeared to be holding some ritual. They were praying to an unknown deity? In the ritual, I saw Grimm. Grimm, who got infected on the Nameless Island and was undeniably deceased, appeared once again on the Nameless Island. Emperor, when did you start writing horror stories? Also, where's the rest? Klein's gaze froze onto the last line of the third diary page, and he discovered that there wasn't any new information. Apart from that, he was similarly alarmed by Emperor Roselle's description of the beyonder creature's strange gathering and their worship of an unknown entity. One had to understand that not all beyonder creatures had intelligence and could be communicated with. Many of them were monsters who had lost control or had madness as an innate property. And these monsters that had lost control were gathered together, worshipping some unknown existence. Unfortunately, the Emperor didn't leave behind the coordinates of the Nameless Island. However, even if he had recorded it, I wouldn't dare to head over, for fear of any infection. If I were to die only to be revived on the island, that would be troublesome. I'll need to be at least a sequence 4 or even a sequence 3 before I'll have what it takes to explore it. As Klein thought, he made the diary in his hand vanish. He then turned to look at Katlia and asked with a smile, "What's your request?" Katlia asked without even thinking, "Honorable Mr. Fool, I wish to know if Emperor Roselle once participated in a very secretive and very ancient organization." Very secretive and very ancient. Twilight Hermit Order? Emperor Roselle used to be a member of it? Audrey suddenly recalled Mr. Fool's previous mention of that organization. Alger recalled the corresponding matter and remembered that in Miss Justice's description of the Desire Apostle case in Backland, there was a mysterious organization mentioned. Back then, Mr. Fool had told the members not to say the organization's name in the outside world, because any mention of it will be known. Such an organization does match Emperor Roselle's status. Alger nodded inwardly. As for Klein, he thought of something else. Queen Mystic's choice of diary pages are vague. She isn't able to accurately and precisely ask questions based on the content. It also means that she roughly knows that diary pages from certain periods are very important with key information within them, or she is able to discern Roselle's emotions from when it was written. As for Mam Hermit's question, it didn't pose any problems for Klein. He smiled and said, yes. At the same time, he silently warned himself, in the future, I need to be careful that Queen Mystic's questions might be completely unrelated to the diary pages she hands over. Thankfully, I've read quite a number of Roselle's diary, and I have quite a good understanding of the Emperor. After saying that, he added and said with a smile, it's your turn. He didn't directly mention the Twilight Hermit Order, wishing that he could answer another question based on this topic in the future. Katlia bowed and expressed her gratitude before looking at the magician. I wish to obtain clues regarding the direct descendants of the Abraham family. 1,000 pounds. She had no psychological burden when it came to offering a price, as Queen Mystic could definitely provide compensation for her. Why did you directly look at me? She already knows that my teacher is a member of the Abraham family? Furs was first alarmed before realizing that it was nothing surprising. This was because this matter wasn't a secret to the other members of the Tarot Club apart from Mam Hermit. It was very normal for them to mention it after completing a transaction with her. Although 1,000 pounds was very attractive, Furs didn't plan on selling information on her teacher. In all her life, there were only a handful of people who had been truly sincere to her, therefore, she cherished such relationships. After some deliberation, Furs asked, why are you looking for them? If you can provide a reason, I can pass the message. As for any further developments, it will depend on them. I have no say on those matters. Indeed, she might appear ordinary, but she actually conceals many secrets. She's a lady who's cautious and meticulous. Katlia sighed inwardly as she said with a nod, that's very reasonable. I'm searching for the direct descendants of the Abraham family in the hopes of obtaining information on Mr. Dorr. Pass this message to them and see if there's a chance for cooperating. Well, just for passing on the message, I'll pay you 350 pounds. If they're willing to take up the matter, I'll pay another 650 pounds. Furs held back for a full second before answering, deal. After saying that, she came to realize the hidden meaning behind Mam Hermit's words. Mr. Dorr is related to the Abraham family? That's right. My bracelet came from Mam Elisa, and it came from the Abraham family. Yes, teacher still doesn't know that I'm aware he's part of the Abraham family. I can only casually mention it in my letters that someone was searching for the direct descendants of the Abraham family at a particular gathering, and that it has something to do with Mr. Dorr. I wonder what kind of reaction teacher will have. At this point, Miss Justice was happy for her friend, sensing that her friend had escaped the predicament of being broke. Furs is already sequence 7. She has almost caught up to me. I have to become a hypnotist as soon as possible. As she had such thoughts, she glanced at the tarot club members, wishing that they had clues to the fruit of an illusory chime tree. Miss Justice's gaze really makes it hard to say no. Furs lowered her head in embarrassment. This was because she had yet to obtain any clues regarding the fruit of an illusory chime tree in her circles. Sitting across from Audrey, Alger thought for 2 seconds and said, I have clues, but it will take 2 weeks before I can obtain it. He did have clues. A long time ago, he had discovered an illusory chime tree when he entered the primitive island with Kalangos. But due to his lacking strength, he didn't attempt to approach it. And now, he had the chance of advancing to sequence 5. He naturally didn't want to give up any opportunities for making money. After all, he still owed Admiral of Stars for the information of the Obninsks. As for why he was mentioning it now, in a sense, it was to declare his rights. When the time came, he and the world would explore together. It was best to decide the splitting of the spoils ahead of time to prevent any conflict. Of course, when dealing with the illusory chime tree, it was likely that Gehrman Sparrow would idly stand at the side without rendering any assistance. No problem. Audrey was delighted, and she didn't even ask for a price. She was already beginning to consider finding an excuse or a reason to directly buy it from the psychology alchemists after returning to Backlund in June. With the 2 transactions coming to an end, due to none of the other members having any requests for the time being, Katlia repeated her search for the blood of a mythical creature, and Emlyn once again mentioned that he was searching for the remaining 4 believers of the primordial moon. Then, the tarot gathering entered the free exchange segment. Derek very naturally said, I've already become a notary. You don't have to tell us that. The hanged man had the urge to facepalm, but he replied with a calm voice, although a notary will receive a massive boost in one's physical attributes, it's still more of a support role. If the notarization of a power is valid, you'll have them temporarily enhanced. If the notarization is invalid, the beyonder powers will be forcefully dispersed. At the same time, a notary is good at creating contracts. Once a signature is provided as confirmation, even a sequence 5 cannot violate it. Even if a sequence 4 demigod tries to forcefully violate the contract, they will have to pay quite a price. As a member of the Church of Storms, it was one of the basics for him to know the strengths and weaknesses of the Sun pathway. Therefore, Alger carefully explained the exact situation for Little Sunday. He also reminded him to select a mystical item that was good at controlling a target. If there wasn't any, it was best to select something with powerful offensive strength. Thank you, Mr. Hanged Man, Derek thanked him from the bottom of his heart. Deep down, in the entire tarot club, he felt that the greatest and most respectable person was Mr. Fool, and the most impressive person to strive for as a role model was Mr. World. And the most reliable and kind person was none other than wise Mr. Hanged Man. Towards this, Emlyn thought, this fellow has actually caught up to me. No, I can't be surpassed by him. I need to complete the hunting competition as soon as possible to get the rewards. He contemplated for a few seconds, and after receiving Mr. Fool's permission, he conjured the thin moon puppet that resembled a wooden pole. Ladies and gentlemen, does anyone of you know what this is? He knew that Mr. Fool was definitely aware of the answer, but he temporarily didn't have anything he could use for an equal exchange with this mighty existence. Therefore, he could only rely on the other members of the Tarot Club for any answers. Isn't this the puppet I saw at that gathering? Mr. Moon already found his target. Fur similarly waited for others to give an answer out of curiosity. Xianxia carefully observed it before frowning. It's likely a moon envoy. It's a beyonder item that primordial moon believers create by using a bloody ritual that spans centuries. It's said to be imbued with divine powers. Each one of them possesses an unimaginable horror. Where did you obtain it from? It's very dangerous. It's best that you hand it over to the upper echelons of the sanguine. Emlyn changed his sitting posture and chuckled. I encountered it when hunting the primordial moon believer. She's already dead, while I'm still alive. Mr. Moon's flaunting of himself is really obvious. The senior spectator, Audrey, chuckled inwardly. Xianxia was taken aback. Without deliberately hiding anything, she asked, how did you do it? Did the upper echelons of the sanguine provide you with assistance? Emlyn gaped, somewhat at a loss for words. Only then did he realize that this topic wasn't suitable for a deeper discussion. Ahem. He cleared his throat and looked towards the end of the long bronze table. I sought help from Mr. Fool. Sought help from Mr. Fool? You can do that? Xianxia was stunned by what she heard. Having been punished and discovering that his blessed, Gehrman Sparrow, was becoming more and more impressive, she no longer had any doubts regarding Mr. Fool's status or abilities. She even knew that when Mr. Fool pulled her in through the use of an ancient item, allowing her to escape the pursuit of knowledge, she had come to realize that he was in existence at least at the level of the hidden sage or primordial moon. However, for certain reasons, he wasn't able to interfere with the real world, making her suspect him to be an ancient god that was undergoing an awakening process. The moon's words left her surprised that Mr. Fool was able to provide substantial help to the Tarot Club members, and wasn't just someone who could only provide knowledge or pull them above the gray fog. On the one hand, this means that in times of danger, I can also pray directly to Mr. Fool for help. This is more ridiculous than any ritual. On the other hand, it reveals the fact that Mr. Fool's recovery process is faster than I had imagined. Many thoughts instantly flashed through Xianxia's mind. Audrey, Derek, and company weren't that surprised. They had more or less sought Mr. Fool's help in the past, and they had even witnessed the angel under this great existence. Seeing everyone's gaze fall on him, Emlyn shrank his neck as he lifted his chin. I paid a price. It was a fair and equal exchange. Fair and equal exchange. A mighty existence's immediate and effective response is priceless. Xianxia couldn't help but retort inwardly. She didn't directly say it, because she too wished to use the opportunity of such a fair and equal exchange in the future. It would imply that she would have an additional life compared to others. Furs was quite puzzled by Mr. Moon's deliberate emphasis on the principle of fair and equal exchange. Everyone who had sought Mr. Fool's help had made a corresponding payment. Mr. Moon sure is a man who cares about his reputation, no, a sanguine. Audrey seriously evaluated Emlyn's emotional changes that happened over a span of seconds. As the exchange continued, the tarot gathering slowly came to an end. After returning to the City of Silver, Derek first recalled a notary's strengths and weaknesses mentioned by Mr. Hanged Man. Then, he once again headed for the Twin Towers that was north of the city to select a mystical item. He didn't do this before, because his condition wasn't stable after advancing. He was worried that making contact with a mystical item would lead to him losing control. Inside the spire, Derek Berg listed his requirements after finishing the paperwork. He saw a filtered list of items and obtained the corresponding documents that contained the information. After having a careful read and observation period, he quickly narrowed down the choices to two. The first was Cardi's ring. It was ancient and simple in appearance, and it was completely iron black in color. It was engraved with dark and complicated patterns. It was left behind by a resident of the City of Silver a long time ago. It could aid the wearer in awing a target, causing them to stop. It could also make ordinary humans temporarily lose their reason, or it could awaken the hidden emotions and memories of a crazy monster, allowing them to enter a brief period of confusion in which they wouldn't deliver any attacks. The other item was Thunder God's Roar. It was obtained from a city that was in ruins. It was rather heavy and resembled a sledgehammer. It was dark blue in color while silver lightning swirled around it. Holding its handle felt like holding the leg bone of a creature. It could produce sounds that left the enemy in fear and chaos while in combat, as though a thunder god had descended upon the ground as he kept roaring. Every strike brought with it a potent destructiveness with no lack of terrifying lightning. The negative effect of Cardi's ring was that the wearer would unknowingly produce another self. Therefore, one needed to periodically receive treatment from a psychoanalyst. If there were any mistreatments, then it could result in the aggravation of the problem, making it harder to treat. And eventually, the two selves would enter a fight, ultimately leading to losing control. In contrast, Thunder God's roar didn't have that many latent risks. It would only make the user be a little irascible bit by bit. As long as one periodically vented their emotions, there wouldn't be a problem. However, it also had another side effect. In a completely dark environment, the chances of being attacked by terrifying monsters from the depths of darkness was 100%. The chances of being attacked is 100%. Upon seeing this number, Derek turned gloomy. This meant that many City of Silver residents had vanished because of this reason. They were the former owners of Thunder God's Roar. Which should I choose? Generating another self is terrifying. Miss Justice has mentioned before that it's called dissociative identity disorder. Thunder God's Roar not only has a power that affects the enemy's state, but it also has a rather powerful offensive capability. My axe of hurricane has been used too many times, so it will likely be damaged ahead of time. I can produce light by myself, so I don't have to be worried about absolute darkness. Derek thought for a moment and pointed at the dark blue sledgehammer. I want Thunder God's Roar. 160 Buckland Street. Klein walked out of his master bedroom and saw butler Walter waiting for him with a few invitation letters in hand. Sir, there are a total of 3 invitations this week. There's an afternoon tea session on Wednesday, a literary salon on Friday, and a banquet on Saturday. They were sent from. Klein listened with a warm expression before saying with a smile, tell these friendly inviters that I'll be participating. All right, sir. Walter bowed and left the 3rd story. Seeing the figure disappear from the stairwell, Klein couldn't help but sigh inwardly. After another week of such invitations, it will be my turn to invite my neighbors for a banquet or a ball. By repeating this act of inviting others and being invited, I'll really enter their circles and would be recommended by them to important figures at even higher levels. I'll be able to enter different clubs. Haha, such recommendations are definitely established on a foundation of having sufficient wealth. A person without any value wouldn't be recommended. Socializing for high society is truly troublesome. It'll take at least another month before I'll get to make contact with people who were slightly involved in the great smog of Backland. The church is easier. As long as there's enough donations and enough piousness, I'll be able to freely enter and exit to listen to the bishop's preachings. Of course, that's on the premise I pass the investigation. If everything goes well, I'll be able to figure out the rotation schedule of the keepers and find a chance to go behind Cheney's gate. Klein reined in his thoughts as he instructed his valet, Richardson, to bring him his coat, hat, and cane. According to his schedule, he was to head to the Royal Grand Theatre to see the most popular play, The Betrayer's Ring, in recent times. This isn't solely for entertainment. It's to understand the popular plays, famous music, and trending novels. Only then could he have a common topic of conversation at the various high society gatherings. Being a popular gentleman must be tiring. Behind a 1-minute performance lies 10 years of hard work. Social gatherings such as these are really exhausting. As Klein lampooned, he allowed Richardson to help him wear a coat before he sat in his high-end 4-wheeled carriage. He headed for the Royal Grand Theatre in Westborough, where he had a luxurious box to himself. And watched The Betrayer's Ring. It's different from television and movies. A play's acting is more exaggerated and impactful. Yes, this is determined by the acting environment. The story isn't bad. But why does it seem familiar? Don't tell me that it's a story adapted from Emperor Rozel's works. These are likely famous play actors. The papers have mentioned them before. It's said that they're very popular, just like celebrities on Earth during the age of the internet. As long as I participate in the gatherings of high society, I'll definitely have the opportunity of meeting them. As Klein watched the play, he habitually lampooned inwardly. Sherwood Borough, at the ticket booth of a large theater. Melissa, who finally had her turn, pushed the notes and coins through the booth window and said, "The Betrayer's Ring. 2 tickets. 3 p.m. on Sunday." After watching The Betrayer's Ring, Klein sat in his carriage as he sipped a cup of black tea and received the evening papers that Richardson had purchased. He first flipped through the play's critic column, and he found the comments from some professional critics. He compared their reviews to his own, and he gradually formulated a unique and profound experience. Yes, at the very least, it's enough to fool those ladies and gentlemen. After Klein finished his homework, he leisurely read the papers and was surprised to find a piece of news. The Backlund Bike Company's 10% shares have been sold. Further inquiries won't be entertained. It's done? By publishing this piece of news, it means Mr. Isengard has already received the money. Klein was first delighted before he frowned slightly. His gaze landed on the exclamation mark at the end. The information was indeed what he and Isengard Stanton had agreed upon ahead of time, but he found that exclamation mark was rather harsh on the eyes. Such a statement doesn't need an exclamation mark. Mr. Isengard is a person who pays attention to details. He wouldn't give the papers free rein. He deliberately left the exclamation to pass a message? He's giving a warning? While pondering, Klein suddenly realized something. The 10% shares which Isengard Stanton sold are obviously from Sherlock Moriarty. With the former's character, he wouldn't sell it for no reason. In a certain sense, this means that Sherlock Moriarty or his proxy has returned to Backlund. Therefore, one of the factions of the royal family that was involved with the Great Smog of Backlund had acutely noticed this situation and has begun monitoring Detective Isengard Stanton, hoping to capture the person who heads over to claim the cash. How should I get the money? Klein seemed to naturally read the papers as he began seriously considering the pertinent question. 10 at night. Backlund was drizzling again as a thin fog produced a blurry sense of beauty amidst the street lamps. Isengard Stanton's assistant, Bowen, surveyed the bottom level once before walking to the side of the oriel window and was prepared to shut the final window. At that moment, a shadow scuttled in and landed firmly on the protruding wall. It was a blue, short-furred stray cat. Bowen saw the large pair of yellow eyes looking at him as he couldn't help but chuckle. There's no food here. As a detective's work made him prone to revenge, and him having many secrets to hide, Isengard Stanton's cook and servants were paid by the hour. There were a fixed number of hours a day, and they wouldn't prepare too much food. This made it difficult for there to be any leftovers after dinner. The blue cat opened its mouth but didn't produce any meowing sounds. It began speaking like a human. "I'm Sherlock Moriarty. I'm here to meet Mr. Isengard Stanton." Although Bowen was a Beyonder who was nurtured by the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom, he was a low-sequence Beyonder and his horizons were stilted. This was the first time he was encountering a speaking cat, so he was momentarily shocked and dazed. After a few seconds, he came to his senses and recalled what the cat had just said. It said it's Sherlock Moriarty? This great detective really isn't simple. He actually changed into a cat, controlled a cat. Such powers are really strange and terrifying. Bowen rapidly calmed down and didn't directly answer the cat. He reached out to close the windows. After doing all of this, he said with a suppressed voice, "Follow me." The cat immediately leaped from the platform behind the oriel window as it agilely followed behind Bowen with its tail up. It followed him all the way to the second story and watched him knock on Isengard Stanton's bedroom door. "Is there something?" Isengard, who was dressed in pajamas with faint lines, opened the door and asked. He was just enjoying his tobacco before sleeping. Bowen cautiously pointed to the crouched blue cat beside him. "Mr. Sherlock Moriarty is looking for you." Isengard, with his white sideburns and thin face, raised his brows slightly and looked down. He took 2 steps back and allowed the blue cat to saunter into his bedroom. "Return to your room and get some sleep. Wake up as per normal tomorrow." We still have a case awaiting us, Isengard instructed Bowen as though nothing had happened. After his assistant left him, he closed the door and turned to look at the blue cat who was sitting beside the reclining chair. He chuckled. I never expected you to have such beyonder powers. I was worried you would directly come over. I noticed your exclamation mark, the cat said with a smile. It had to be said that having such an expression show on a cat's face was rather odd. It left anyone who witnessed it feel a chill run down their back. Isengard didn't react abnormally towards that as he sucked at his pipe, sat on a reclining chair, and slowly exhaled in comfort. He said with a smile, I trust your intelligence. Thank you for your compliments. The cat politely reached out its paws and bowed. Isengard observed it and rubbed its pipe while smiling. You should have understood what is happening. Those people don't dare to monitor me too strictly, afraid that I would discover them and end up telling the Church of Evernight and the Church of Steam. So even though it will be quite troublesome for them if they get exposed, I believe that they have a demigod among them. This is a deduction and is also based on certain feedback. After all, I've lived on this street for years. Therefore, humans and animals wouldn't be stopped from entering my house. I believe you've already figured that out. But when leaving, you'll definitely be tailed and tracked. Do you have the means to evade their tracking? The sum of money isn't a small one. Bringing it out would be quite conspicuous. Let me think. Were you planning on conferring with me in order to get me to deposit the money into a particular bank account, and then you'll find many people to withdraw them in different parts of Backland? Upon saying that, Isengard said with a self-deprecating smile, this is the best solution I can think of, but carrying it out would be extremely troublesome. The cat didn't give a direct response as it gave a deep chuckle. I only need you to lend me an empty room and 3 candles. No problem. Isengard didn't press the issue as he said, the shares were sold for £12,000. The buyer is the daughter of Earl Hall, Audrey. Well, the hiring of lawyers and accountants, as well as the publishing of the advertisements cost a total of £600. In addition, there was a 0.5% stamp duty and 20% D-type taxes. So at the end of the day, there's only £8,940 left. D-type taxes were a tax on commercial, financial, and specialized income. There's tax. More than £2,000 are gone just like that. The cat's expression instantly froze. Klein was formerly a nighthawk, and his salary was tax-free. Later, as a private detective, his income was difficult to be monitored, so he never declared his income for tax purposes. Later, he became an adventurer, and since the bounties targeted at pirates enjoyed concessions, there was no need for him to pay taxes on them. Hence, he never realized that tax was something he needed to pay. Therefore, back when Isengard Stanton had mentioned taxes, he hadn't taken it to heart, believing that it wouldn't be much. However, reality had given him a heavy beating. As for why there weren't any taxes for the share transaction the previous time, taxes were waived by the lone government for initial investments related to inventions, as a way to foster inventions. After a brief silence, the cat's whiskers moved as it said, "All right, give me the cash." Move it to the empty room. There's no problems with the money, right? I've already checked them. They wouldn't do any cheap tricks on that, as it would be an insult to my intelligence. Isengard stood up with his pipe. Remember to send me a signed letter of confirmation by mail later. It's already on its way, the cat replied, prepared. Isengard walked to the safe inside the master bedroom, using a passcode and key to open it. Then, he took out stacks of cash, and he stuffed them into different briefcases. Following that, he left the master bedroom with these briefcases and entered a guest room diagonally opposite the master bedroom. Check it, Isengard placed the briefcases filled with cash on the ground as he said to the cat that followed him in. I trust you, the cat said after taking a few glances. Isengard nodded and pointed to the cabinet. There are candles inside. With that said, he left the door, held the doorknob, and said with a smile, I'm really curious how you would leave. I believe it will be a very exciting magic show. Isengard Stanton closed the door with a click, leaving the guest room silent and bleak. At the cat's side, a figure dressed in a dark red coat and an old triangular hat appeared. It was none other than Klein's marionette, Wraith Seigneur. He found the candles and quickly set up a simple altar. Skipping over many of the first few steps, he directly muttered in Elvish, "Blessed of the sea and spirit world, guardian of the Rorstad archipelago, ruler of the undersea creatures, master of tsunamis and storms, the great Calvetua. Your devoted servant prays for your attention. I pray for you to take his offerings. I pray for you to open the gates to your kingdom." The wind inside the wall of spirituality suddenly grew in intensity as Seigneur quickly sliced the back of his hand and threw out a few drops of blood. As a sequence 5 wraith, everything on him was material that was rich in spirituality. The strong wind sucked up the blood, howling as it drilled into the candle flame that symbolized sea god Calvetua. The flame burgeoned, forming an illusory door filled with magic labels and symbols. After about 10 seconds, the door let out a heavy creak as it slowly opened. One by one, Seigneur lifted up the briefcases filled with money and threw them into the illusory door. When there was almost none left, the gold coin he stored in his body flew out and landed on the altar. The wraith's figure then disappeared, projecting onto the smooth side of the gold coin. The gold coin trembled as it flew up, hitched a ride on the briefcase ahead of it, and entered the illusory door of sacrifice. Silently, the mysterious door closed as the 3 candlelight were restored to normal. At this moment, the blue, short-furred cat seemed to recover its senses. It looked around blankly as it meowed. After a while, Isengard opened the door and entered, finding all the briefcases with the cash gone. There were only 3 candles burning silently as the blue short-furred cat was warily arching its back at him. While he scrutinized this scene, a rental carriage slowly drove past on the fork on the other end of the street. On the same night, in a building inside Sherwood Borough, Zio returned home under the drizzle. As she wiped her hair with a towel, she said to Furs, "Your letter has been mailed." Furs tersely answered as she began to guess when her teacher would respond. At this moment, Zio put down the towel and quipped, "There's news about Mr. X's gathering. It'll still be at the same place on Friday night." "Great. I can tell Mr. World. I wonder how much I'll need to pay." Furz's eyes lit up when she heard that. Before she could ask about the details, Zio added, "Mr. X also gave a mission that's said to have handsome rewards." It's to inform him of people around them who have abnormal luck." "People with abnormal luck?" Furs muttered in puzzlement. Is this man's brain working? Who would divulge things around them at such a gathering? This will make it easy for others to discover their true identities. Who knows? Perhaps he really is a lunatic. Zio didn't know anyone with abnormal luck, so she answered without much thought. Furs carefully thought for a moment, but she failed to figure out the true intentions behind this mission. All she could do was throw it to the back of her mind. She planned on praying to Mr. Fool once Zio went to take a bath, passing the relevant information to the World Gehrman Sparrow. 770. A child should act like a child plus, turn off reset. Mr. X is looking for people with abnormal luck? Above the gray fog, Klein ruminated over the information Miss Magician had provided, in an attempt to analyze anything of use. After thinking to no avail, he decided to approach it from another angle. He first recalled the people who had abnormal luck around him to see if there were any connections. The Fog Sea's strongest hunter Anderson had counts as one. Dr. Aaron Series is another. Both of them were affected by one of the snakes of fate. Angel of Fate Ouroboros was one of the creators of Rose Redemption. This secret organization supports and believes the true creator. The Aurora Order is equivalent to the true creator's church. A series of circumstances surfaced in Klein's mind as he quickly came to a conclusion. This is Angel of Fate Ouroboros' attempt to search for Snake of Fate Wulaseptin. He is driving the members of the Aurora Order to help him find Snake of Mercury Wulaseptin. And this implies that behind Mr. X, there's a king of angels existing somewhere in Backland. Under such circumstances, assassinating Mr. X will be equivalent to having a death wish. It's no wonder Mr. X doesn't care about the uniqueness of Backland. The official factions would at most imagine that he has a saint backing him. In the official dossiers, the Aurora Order only has 5 saints. This way, they will respond in the wrong manner. After Klein made the judgment, the first thought he had was to decline Miss Magician's request, and also to warn her not to provoke Mr. X. If it wasn't because sounding the alarm might affect Snake of Mercury Wuxia, while the Church of the Evernight Goddess clearly had records of Dr. Aaron Ceres' bout of bad luck, Klein would have gotten Miss Magician to report both the Angel of Fate Ouroboros and Mr. X to a particular church. He calmly thought for another few seconds and conjured the World Gehrman Sparrow, making him pray in the grey fog. "I'll confirm the situation and give you a reply tomorrow." He didn't directly reject her commission, as he planned on first asking Snake of Mercury Wuxia. He then immediately returned to the real world, and he carefully took out the extremely fragile paper crane from his wallet before gently unfolding it. Klein wasn't in a rush to write anything. Instead, he first recalled the various questions he needed to consult Wulan. After thinking up a draft, he got out a pencil and sharpened it with a blade. After stretching his muscles, Klein wrote, "The members of the Aurora Order are searching for people with abnormal luck. I wonder if you know how to use the Worm of Time to create charms. Does your placenta blood count as a mythical creature's blood? If it does, I hope to obtain 1 drop. What price would I have to offer?" Klein had originally planned on asking Wuxia how he was able to maintain his rationality. After all, the Church's information indicated that there had been no public faith in the Snake of Fate. However, he ultimately curbed himself from doing that, afraid that Wuxia in his infant state replied, "How did you conceive the notion that I'm rational?" That way, he had no idea if Wu was joking or speaking the truth. Although there's no organization that believes in the Snake of Fate, there are certain areas that believe in the God of Luck. It's considered a traditional custom. Perhaps they are an alternative identity of Wuxia or Ouroboros. Klein mumbled silently and used the best of his clown abilities before managing to refold the paper crane. He then placed it underneath his pillow. After doing all of that, he had the time to calculate how much cash he had. 17,046 pounds, 5 gold coins, 3 soldi, and 8 pence in change. If I had assets like a house, manor, and company shares, having so many liquid assets would make me quite a tycoon in Backland. Of course, I'm still very far from being a top tycoon. To reach them, one's overall assets need to be £1 million. As Klein was glad that he had quite a bit of money, he recalled his debt, as well as the large investments that he needed to make in order to develop his persona's image. He then drank a mouthful of water, got into bed, and covered himself with a light but warm blanket before he slowly fell asleep. Amidst his reverie, Klein suddenly snapped awake and saw the desolate black plains. He walked all the way to the pitch-black steeple in the middle of the plains, passing through the chaotic and abnormal layout before coming deep into the steeple. Like before, there was a circle of tarot cards on the ground. However, the protruding area in the middle of the tarot cards didn't have any silvery lines written. Wuxia didn't give a reply. Then why did he pull me into this dream? Amidst Klein's puzzlement, he suddenly saw a black baby pram roll out of the shadows. And it was an infant whose looks were indiscernible while it was wrapped in silver silk. "Mr. Snake of Fate?" Klein politely and cautiously asked. The infant immediately said in a clear voice, "What makes you so sure it's a mister? Isn't that determined from your name?" "Don't mind such details." Klein lampooned and relaxed due to the attitude he was given. "Then, how may I address you?" Wuxia in baby form tersely answered as it said, stumped, "I haven't decided." "As you know." "Oh, you don't." "Every time I start again, I try to make myself a little different, so as to maintain a good mental state. A child should act like a child while they're a child." Klein's heart stirred when he heard that. Is this the way the monster pathway maintains its reasoning so as to resist madness? In the black pram, Wuxia replied briskly, "Yes, every beginning washes away the madness. However, it still needs certain anchoring from faith, otherwise, I wouldn't be able to maintain my state as a sequence one for too long." Haha, compared to before, you're becoming more and more knowledgeable." Oh, apart from anchoring oneself with faith, there are other ways to resist the madness. However, restarting is clearly an ability of sequence 1 snake of fate of the monster pathway. Other Beyonder pathways aren't able to emulate that. Mr. Azek is constantly losing his memories and repeatedly finding himself. Does it also involve the same concept? Klein nodded in thought as he made every second count by asking, I suspect Ouroboros is searching for you through the Aurora Order members. Wuxia scoffed. I've been playing hide-and-seek with him for a very long time. He isn't good at such matters. It's quite obvious that he doesn't have a childhood. Every time he restarts, he grows up beside the true creator. He lacks the psychological experience of the different stages in life, causing him to be very crazy at times, but of course, he doesn't mind. I did inform Ricardo to use the die of probability in certain places and leave marks. This will mess up Ouroboros' judgment. He will soon leave Backland once again. That means there's still chance of assassinating Mr. X. Yes, when the time comes, I'll divine the level of danger above the gray fog. Klein didn't continue on this topic as he asked, do you know how to use the Worm of Time to create charms? Wuxia didn't directly answer and instead returned with a question, you obtained a Worm of Time from Palace Zoroast? How did you know? Klein was taken aback as he asked. He wasn't surprised that Wuxia had managed to mention the origins of the Worm of Time. After all, there weren't many demigods in the Marauder pathway who could create avatars, but why hadn't he assumed that it was Blasphemer Amon? The latter could also leave behind a Worm of Time. Wuxia smiled and said, Palace Zoroast isn't in good condition, and he had to parasitize your former colleague. Alright, your former colleague was investigating Sherlock Moriarty, and he had entered my house in the middle of the night. I sensed that there was something problematic about him and had given him a short period of bad luck, causing him to encounter other demigods hidden in Backland. And when he was in danger, Palace Zoroast had taken action. Haha, it would have been fine even if he hadn't taken action. It's only a prank. I would have given your former colleague sufficient good luck at the critical moment. Leonard is investigating Sherlock Moriarty? The grandpa in his body is called Palace Zoroast. Klein frowned slightly, unsure where the problem stemmed from. Wuxia continued, the creation of a Worm of Time charm isn't too difficult for you. You can pray to that uniqueness trait about you and use a compound of mercury and pure silver as a medium to draw the corresponding symbols. It's not too difficult. Pray to the Fool? That's right. The mysterious space above the gray fog clearly has a form of attraction to the Marauder pathway. Klein was thrilled as he felt like he had grasped something. At this moment, Will smiled and added, as for what the corresponding symbol is, I've no idea. What a huge reversal. Klein couldn't help but twitch the corner of his lips. When he noticed that Wuxia wasn't speaking any further, he hurriedly smiled and said, there's another question. About your placenta blood. Before he could finish his sentence, Will suddenly opened his mouth and let out a cry. Wah! He began wailing like a real infant. Can't we talk normally? Klein froze in his spot. If he hadn't already confirmed it, he really would have suspected whether the entity before him was a sequence one, the president of the life school of thought. Alright. I just wanted to ask if it's the blood of a mythical creature, Klein said as he raised his hands midway. Will stopped crying and said with a laugh, of course, but I'll swap it ahead of time. Otherwise, everyone will die on the spot. He paused for a moment before saying, if you can give me something suitable, it's not impossible to give you one drop. Alright, goodbye. Just as Wuxia said that, Klein felt the steeple shake as the dream rapidly shattered. Soon, he woke up. What item would a snake of fate be interested in? Klein slowly sat up and leaned against a pillow. He thought for some time and decided to consider it at a later date. After all, he was still at least a month away from Wuxia's birth. He could also leave the question for the Hermit Catlia and Queen Mystic Bernadette, who was backing her, to rack their brains over. Of course, Klein didn't eliminate the possibility of Wuxia's sudden choice of having an early birth. He slowly turned his attention into creating a Worm of Time charm. According to Will-Septon's explanation, he had most of the conditions required, but he was just short of the corresponding symbol. Pray to the Fool and use the powers of the mysterious space above the gray fog. I wonder if a symbol corresponding to the Marauder pathway would work. Even if it does, I don't know what it is. Unless I pull a Marauder above the gray fog and let the high-back chair produce the corresponding pattern. As Klein thought about the details, he suddenly had an idea. In that case, perhaps he could try the symbol behind the Fool's chair. It was the pupil-less eye, a symbol representing secrecy, and the contorted lines that represented change. I wonder if it will work. Divination won't be able to rule it out by elimination, but I can predict if the attempt will be successful. Besides, even if it fails, it shouldn't be too big a problem. After all, I'm praying to myself. Even if the material were to be wasted in the experiment, it would enter above the gray fog and not be lost. With this in mind, Klein felt pumped. He couldn't help but get out of bed to try out the experiment that very night. A material like the Worm of Time that's left behind by a Marauder demigod at Amon's level still has its essence and level even if it's dead. When using it for a charm, it might not reach the level of an angel for various reasons, but it wouldn't be too far off. It'll be about the peak strength of a saint. If Klein succeeded, it would be equivalent to having an additional trump card. At critical points in time, it might give him an additional life. So how could he not be excited and expectant? I can only stir some of the powers of the mysterious space above the gray fog. The level of the Worm of Time charm will likely drop a little more. But regardless, it will definitely be like the 9th law given to me by Admiral Emirius. If I used the Blatherer's aura to create a high-level charm in the Devil domain, it will likely be at the level of the 9th law. Unfortunately, I wouldn't dare to pray to the dark side of the universe. Klein wore his pajamas as he stood barefooted. He took 4 steps counterclockwise on a thick carpet as he chanted the incantation before entering above the gray fog. Sitting at the Fool's seat at the end of the long bronze table, he conjured a dark red fortune teller and yellowish-brown goatskin. He wrote down the corresponding divination statement. The charm I'm about to begin making will be successful. Unwinding the spirit pendulum from his wrist, Klein held it with his left hand and entered the state of cogitation. After repeating the divination statement 7 times, he opened his eyes and saw the topaz spinning counterclockwise at a rather slow speed and ordinary amplitude. This means that it will succeed. But that begs the question, will it successfully verify that the symbol I use is effective, or successfully verify that it doesn't work? As an experienced seer, Klein attempted to interpret the revelation, but he failed to obtain any confirmation. With regards to that, he could only decide to experiment. There was no way for him to eliminate the mistakes if he didn't do so. Right on the heels of that, Klein wrote a new divination statement. The assassination of Mr. X this Friday will be dangerous. This time, the topaz pendant continued spinning clockwise at a faster frequency and greater amplitude. There's significant danger, but it doesn't reach the level of a demigod's participation, much less that of a king of angels. If it involves an existence of that level, he will definitely sense my divination and resist it. From the looks of it, Angel of Fate Ouroboros will soon be let out of Backland. This means that the danger itself is a result of Mr. X and his subordinates. It's within the limits of what I can handle. As long as I don't make a mistake, the chances of success are pretty high. Klein made a judgment, put down the pen and paper, and returned to the real world. As a mysticism expert who often created charms, he had no lack of common materials. He immediately got out some candles and lit them on the table. Following that, he set up a simple altar against the glow of dusk. He then used a piece of silver to draw out the combined symbol that represented the Fool. As Klein didn't know what path number the Fool represented or what magic labels there were, he could only ensure that both sides remained equal. According to the books of charms he had read, these would similarly satisfy the rules of mysticism, but the corresponding might would be reduced. The chances of failure would rise because the existence that one was praying to could consider it as being irreverent and not pious enough. Of course, it wasn't a problem for Klein since he wouldn't reject himself. After completing the act of carving the symbol, Klein found a metal bottle and used his spirituality together with a container, and he then poured the mercury out and filled the carved-out pattern. This time, he decided to complete only the front side for now. He would then summon himself and respond to himself. He would then bring the worm with the 12 translucent rings back to the room and then place it on a silver sheet. After doing all of this, Klein adjusted the altar and took 2 steps back. He then said in ancient Hermes, "The fool that doesn't belong to this era." Following the process, he completed the necessary steps before taking 4 steps counterclockwise and entered the space above the gray fog. After imbuing himself with the Black Emperor card, he used his spirituality to stir a tiny amount of the powers above the gray fog to respond to his prayers. While the surging energy poured into the circle of light, Klein didn't hesitate to return to the real world. He saw the altar had turned dark and gloomy, as though there were countless secrets hidden here. And the silver sheet had already floated up, fusing with the worm of time's corpse. Klein took 2 steps forward, flipped the silver sheet around, and he filled the carved symbol on the back with mercury. As the lines lit up, they effused a hazy luster. Klein rapidly retracted his arms and saw the luster grow richer. He then enveloped the silver sheet and the worm of time's corpse inside. Suddenly, the darkness around the altar distorted as the entire space seemed to turn abnormal. This change disappeared as fast as it came. The charms filled with strange patterns slowly landed on the desk. It was entirely translucent in color and was dark black. It was like a miniature card made out of a special crystal. It also resembled the eyes of a particular existence that was watching this world. It succeeded. It really works. Klein was delighted as he hurriedly picked up the charm. He found it cold to the touch as if he was touching snow. Regardless of the resulting effects of the charm, just its formation had meant a success. Klein had once again obtained a high-level charm at the demigod level. He busied himself again, bringing the completed item above the gray fog. He then used dream divination to figure out how to use it. The charm, which was in the shape of a black crystal card, had only one effect, but it was highly potent. It was to siphon off the luck of others. And to be precise, it was to graft fate. A period of the target's fate would be grafted onto the user. The simplest situation would be when an enemy is about to kill me. I'll use this charm, siphoning off his fate of surviving, as well as grafting the fate of impending death onto him. Then, the situation would be developed into him clearly succeeding, only for him to die. It does match the Marauder pathway's usual traits, but it's more sinister and terrifying. It's going from stealing wealth to stealing fate. If the Worm of Time were alive, and I was able to fully employ the power of the mysterious space above the gray fog, this charm might even point towards the domain of time. As Klein thought, he felt a sense of fear. If it wasn't for the assistance that this mysterious space had given him by obstructing and purging things, he had no way to deal with a Worm of Time. Phew, now it's mine. I can't call it a Worm of Time anymore. I'll just call it Luck Siphon. Klein once again got busy as he brought back the Luck Siphon charm to the real world. After dealing with the traces of the ritual, he gravely placed the high-level charm into the iron cigar case, putting it together with Azek's copper whistle and the senior gold coin. He then sealed and isolated the case with a wall of spirituality. Being in a good mood, Klein didn't feel sleepy. He drew the curtains a little and allowed the crimson moonlight to shine in, illuminating his room with tranquility and silence. While he was enjoying the scenery, he suddenly saw a figure sneak out from Member of Parliament Mock's house as it approached amidst the shadows. It was none other than Hazel Mock. She once again headed for the sewers, removed the manhole cover, climbed down, and didn't forget to close the cover. Why is she always heading into the sewers? It's not likely for her to be heading to other areas from here to act like a superhero in the mysterious world. After all, each trip doesn't take her more than an hour. Unless she has very reliable intelligence, it's difficult to achieve anything. Besides, this will make it easy for her to be caught by the official Beyonders. Together with the scene provided to me by Erodes, she's likely finding something. It's very easy for her to encounter danger if she keeps heading into the sewers. Klein stood behind the curtain gap as he observed what was happening under the serene night. He didn't attempt to warn Hazel or let the wraith possess her to let her understand the dangers of the Beyonder world. Firstly, this was because he had quite a subjective view that Hazel's sense of superiority was due to a result of her lacking knowledge and mysticism, so he couldn't be sure. Secondly, he wasn't sure how she had obtained Beyonder powers and a mystical item. Warning her out of gratitude for her kind deed earlier would easily attract unwanted attention or even trouble. After enjoying an evening of peace, Klein returned to bed and slept till daybreak. Before Richardson entered, he turned into Gehrman Sparrow and prayed to the Fool. "I can accept the mission, but regardless of the outcome, I want a stone from that bracelet of yours, as well as the ability to use that spell book of yours for some time. If it succeeds, all spoils of war will be mine. You can only take the target's head. If required, you will need to provide assistance." He wants a stone from my bracelet and the right to use Laymanos travels for some time. How does he know that I have those two items? I don't remember mentioning it during the tarot gatherings. After hearing Gehrman Sparrow's response, Furs was bewildered and rather shocked. It felt like he had seen through all her secrets. She tensed up as she quickly tried recalling how this information could have been leaked. Aside from Teacher, Zio, and Mr. Fool, no one knows that I have these two items, especially Laymanos travels. I haven't even used it. Mr. Fool. Mr. World appears quite strange during the tarot gatherings. He never hands over Emperor Roselle's diary pages, and he doesn't seem to put any effort into this, nor does he show any concern. He and Mr. Fool have a deeper connection. He obtains the relevant information from him? A believer or a blessed? Furs carefully thought over the matter as she grasped something, easing her horror from before. Only at this moment did she have the time and energy to consider if she could accept Gehrman Sparrow's requests. To Furs, such a price was too cheap, far lower than she had expected. Furthermore, it was reasonable. As a Beyonder who seldom went out and just stayed home writing and resting, lending Laymanos travels for some time didn't affect her safety or her need to use it. And likewise, giving one of the two remaining stones in the bracelet that allowed her to travel through the spirit world didn't cause her to lose all her trump cards. The only problem is that Mr. World seems to be willing to only try it once. If he fails, he will still take the payment. Yes, with the fact that he needs to bear the risk, that's normal. I originally imagined that I would need to help him do many things and obtain a reward from Teacher by using the trader's head to repay the debt. First thought calmly for a few seconds before she prayed to Mr. Fool. Please inform Mr. World that I accept his conditions, and I will try my best to provide him assistance in the operation. He originally wished to warn Gehrman Sparrow that using the stone might result in the side effect of receiving the ravings of the full moon, but she then realized that it was apparently only something Beyonders from the apprentice pathway encountered. Regardless if it succeeds or fails, I'll obtain that stone. I'll be able to secretly lead Backland and meet with Mr. Hanged Man to explore that primitive island. When the time comes, I'll use the spellbook to record the usage of the stone. That way, I don't have to worry about the return trip. That's unless my luck is terrible and the recording fails. Klein secretly heaved a sigh of relief, opened the door, and got Richardson to help him dress up. Sir, after breakfast, your schedule is to head to the Royal Museum to see the royal family's collection exhibition. As Richardson helped his employer wear his coat, he informed him of the day's schedule. As Dwayne Dantes mastered social dancing very quickly, the number of etiquette classes in the morning went from 5 times a week to 3 times a week, allowing him to spare time for other things. And such exhibitions were definitely a hot topic of conversation in high society circles. By not going in person, it would make him appear lacking. As for heading to St. Samuel Cathedral for the bishop's preachings, Klein had consciously lowered his frequency. This wasn't because he needed to donate tens of pounds each time, but that he was afraid that heading there frequently despite having the novelty period wear off would incur suspicion. Being natural and reasonable were the core traits of his plans. Other than on a Sunday, he planned on randomly heading to church on 2 of the remaining 6 days. He wanted to rely on an even longer period of time to accumulate intelligence so as to figure out a pattern. He couldn't be impatient or in a rush. I'm already looking forward to it. Klein looked at the dignified reflection of himself as he said to his valet with a smile. Upon thinking of St. Samuel Cathedral and the Church of Evernight, he naturally connected it to Leonard Mitchell's secret investigation of Sherlock Moriarty. He didn't understand what he was suspicious about. Is it because of Emlyn White's purchase of Tinder that drove Leonard to investigate the people related to him, or was it because of the fleeting appearances of the detective in the cases of Capim and Lenevis that made the Red Gloves who are in charge of the investigations notice something? Or could it be both? Klein thought about the clues that he had left behind and had a rough guess. He wasn't afraid that Sherlock Moriarty would be wanted by the Church of Evernight and given a bounty. After all, apart from contacting a few people that he was familiar with, the detective wasn't to appear again. He was worried that someone would discover that Sherlock Moriarty, in his early appearances, resembled Klein Moretti greatly, and as such, they would pursue the deceased former Nighthawk. In fact, it's not a problem even if they discover that. I'm no longer the clown or magician from before. There are more than a handful of demigods searching for me. Even with the high-ranking deacons of the church, there won't be any qualitative changes. Besides, Benson and Melissa truly are ordinary people. The church will definitely not involve them and disturb their lives. I wonder if they will claim the bereavement compensation back. Probably not, for there's no way they can explain it to ordinary people. Klein wasn't that worried with all the debt he was in. This was also why he was so calm when he heard Will Septon mention Klein Moretti's identity last night. How could a Sequence 1 angel who was good at fate-related abilities and had previously interacted with Sherlock Moriarty early on not discover the detective's origins? Even with the grey fog's obstruction that interfered with many details, Will Septon was definitely able to know that Sherlock Moriarty originally came from Tingen. And back in Tingen, Klein had interacted with a youth named Adamasol, who was of the monster pathway, leading him to bleed from his eyes. And if Will Septon were to be aware of this and make a comparison, the answer was obvious. If Leonard were to really realize Sherlock Moriarty's hidden identity, I wonder what kind of expression he would have. Klein gave a self-deprecating laugh as he walked out the master bedroom. He went to the second floor to enjoy the breakfast his cook had prepared specially for him. West Borough, 2 Kings Avenue, Royal Museum. Klein passed through the ticket entrance with butler Walter and valet Richardson and went into the museum. The exhibition was held by the Lone Royal family. They showcased all kinds of collections that had historical meaning from the kingdom's founding so as to allow the public to enjoy and gain an understanding. It was a way to raise the kingdom's citizens' respect and recognition of the royal family. As a graduate from the Department of History, Klein was still rather interested in the exhibition. Many of the matters that he was very familiar with had the corresponding items appear here. They allowed him to plunge into the long and fascinating history from another angle. What left Klein somewhat puzzled was Walter's deep understanding towards most of the exhibits. He introduced them to Duane Dantes with extreme detail. As expected of a butler who came from an aristocratic household. Klein silently nodded. As he perused the exhibits, the trio kept encountering other visitors, and the exhibition hall was quiet and orderly, so people had to converse in whispers. When passing by an exhibit, Klein noticed Walter suddenly stop. He then glanced to his side as his expression turned complicated. As he wasn't a spectator, Klein wasn't able to interpret the actual meaning of those complicated feelings. All he could do was trace Walter's gaze towards the exhibit. Standing in front of the exhibit were a man and a woman. The man was in his 30s and wore a black suit, silk hat, and a golden-laid cane, looking like a gentleman of status and wealth. The woman was in a yellow dress with a golden necklace. Her overall attire was inclined towards bright colors. Mr. Butler is looking at that man. Klein instantly made the judgment as he swept his gaze past the target without anyone detecting him. He realized that the man looked rather old. His skin was dark as a result of frequent exposure to the sun. The back of his hand was like dried wood, and his fingers were extremely rough. If I didn't look at his attire, I would have believed it if someone told me he was a farmer, gardener, or carriage driver. Klein retracted his gaze as he felt a little puzzled. The reason why he noticed these details was because he had seriously considered the appearance of an ordinary person who adventured in the southern continent for extended periods of time back when he was constructing the identity of Dwayne Dantes. He believed that apart from his gaze, bearing, and natural facial features that were etched by his rich experience, Dwayne Dantes also needed to have details, such as skin that had experienced long periods of suntanning, unobvious scars, and rough but strong palms. Otherwise, it wouldn't be enough to prop up such a character's inherent traits. I have to say that from the moment I became a faceless, I'm getting more and more experienced and wise in the aspect of creating a new character. If I were to return to Earth, even without my Beyonder powers, I'll have strong acting skills. As Klein made self-deprecating comments inwardly, he saw Walter recover from his stern look as though nothing had happened. As for the man with somewhat old facial features and rough skin, he pointed at a flag inside the exhibition case. This is the flag that the Earl of Lastings, Prince Herod's Augustus, used during the White Rose War. Unfortunately, he perished in that war. However, his death was the turning point of the entire war and the reason why Lone eventually clinched victory. Look, the flag still has his blood. He's quite knowledgeable in the field of history. Klein's gaze swept towards Walter from the corner of his eye, thought for 2 seconds, and smiled. He approached the couple and interjected in a friendly manner. I never expected such a neglected tidbit of history would be known by someone else. I originally believed that the people's understanding of the White Rose War was only limited to Lone's victory against Intis. Sir, your eruditeness leaves me amazed. To be praised in front of his female partner, the man's expression turned from a wary one to a relaxed one. A gleeful smile appeared on his face. I'm just a person who likes history. He casually swept his gaze towards the servant of the gentleman in front of him as he suddenly frowned before easing his brows. There were remnant looks of puzzlement. Indeed, he knows Butler Walter. Klein smiled while maintaining his composure. Hello there, I'm a merchant from Desi, Dwayne Dantes. How may I address you? The man hesitated and said, William Sykes, a land steward at a manor. William Sykes. A land steward. Klein inwardly repeated the response he got before turning the topic of conversation towards the flag and the White Rose War. After a short chat, he politely bade farewell and walked towards the other exhibits with Walter and Richardson. He continued his own tour of the exhibits, as though his encounter from before was completely trivial, a conversation that was purely coincidental. When it was almost noon, Klein, who had returned to his high-end four-wheeled carriage, looked out at the passing bicycles when he suddenly said, Walter, you seem to know Mr. William Sykes. Walter solemnly nodded and said, I once knew him while I was working for Viscount Conrad's household. He served a member of the royal family, the former Earl of Lastings, Prince Edisac. He didn't conceal anything, and he described William Sykes's background in detail. He was once in service of Prince Edisac? He's living quite a good life after the prince passed away because of the great smog of Backland. I wonder what manor he's the land steward of. Perhaps he knows some secrets? Klein gently nodded and didn't probe further. He was wondering if he should find an opportunity to investigate William Sykes. If William Sykes really knows something, the royal family's faction wouldn't leave him be. Or perhaps he is part of that faction. In short, investigating him will be a rather dangerous matter. There's no way to entrust this matter to Miss Magician, Emlyn White, or Miss Zio. Miss Sharon has the ability to do so, but this might result in destroying her peaceful life. The best solution is still to use Hero Bandit Black Emperor. But the problem is that before stealing the Antigonus family's notebook, my investigations of the Great Smog of Backland should only be superficial. I shouldn't alarm anyone or bring about any accidental changes. Klein appeared to admire the streets outside, but many thoughts were going through his mind. Finally, he decided to hold back for the time being unwilling to affect the most pertinent matter he had at present. After having lunch and taking a nap, Klein received classes in literary appreciation until it was almost evening. After sending away his teacher, he was just about to head to the second story's dining hall when he suddenly heard the doorbell ring. Amidst the ringing, Klein saw Richardson immediately take a few steps forward to open the door. Standing outside were two police officers in black and white checkered uniforms. From their epaulets, one of them was a high-ranking inspector, while the other was a sergeant. "Officers, how may I help you?" Richardson asked on behalf of his employer. The high-ranking inspector was a thin man and had his black hair hidden under his peak cap. His sideburns had a little color as he swept his gaze into the house before warmly saying with a smile, "I'm here for Mr. Dwayne Dantes. There's a case that involves him and his butler." "What is it?" Klein slowly walked to the door. "I'm Dwayne Dantes." After introducing himself, he asked politely, "Officers, how may I address you? If the matter is a little more complicated and needs more time, why not come to my parlor? We can discuss it over tea." The other police officer, the sergeant, was an elegant lady. She was clearly interested in taking up the offer as she looked at the high-ranking inspector, awaiting the decision of her superior. Due to the Church of the Evernight Goddess, the lone police force had plenty of female officers, but due to the other faiths and the prevailing trends of society, they suffered some form of discrimination when it came to promotions and positions. They mostly did clerical work, and there was an invisible ceiling for their career development. The high-ranking inspector smiled and said, "There's no need for tea, but we need to question your servants." He paused before getting to the main point. "Mr. Dwayne Dantes, do you know a person by the name of William Sykes? I got to know him this morning at the Royal Museum." Klein vaguely sensed that some sort of unexpected development had occurred as he asked, "Did something happen to him?" The high-ranking inspector wiped away his smile and said, "He's dead. He died at a hotel near the Royal Museum." "He's dead?" Klein didn't hide his puzzlement and shock. "I just met him, and he's dead? Had he already been targeted?" The inspector nodded solemnly and said, "Yes, the cause of death is rather complicated, and we aren't ruling out the possibility of murder." "What about his female partner?" Klein frowned as he asked. "He had a female partner when I met him. That lady was his mistress. When she left the hotel, William Sykes was still alive. This can be confirmed by the attendants at the hotel because they had later sent him red wine." The inspector simply shared the situation and said, "After leaving the Royal Museum, where did you go?" "I came back here directly. I had lunch, took a nap, and attended lessons. My servants, neighbors, and literary appreciation teacher can prove that," Klein frankly replied. He then turned his head to Richardson and said, "Bring Walter here." Soon, Walter walked down from the second story with a white glove and answered similar questions. After receiving Dwayne Dantes' permission, the two officers questioned the rest of his servants, but they failed to find any problems. They didn't stay for long, politely bidding him farewell and visiting the other neighbors. Klein's appetite wasn't affected by this matter as he went to the second story to enjoy his dinner. Time quickly flew by as he spent the rest of the time reading books and newspapers. Before sleeping, Klein took in the scenery outside the window as he awaited his valet, Richardson, to take away the fruits in the room. Suddenly, he asked without turning his head, "What did Walter do in the afternoon?" "He was busy handling various matters." "He never left," Richardson answered softly. Klein nodded gently without asking further. He began suspecting if he had been overthinking matters. Phew. He slowly exhaled before getting into bed. In the middle of the night, Klein's spirituality was triggered as he snapped awake. He pricked up his brows, left the bed, and arrived by the window. He pulled back the curtains a little. Under the dim moonlight, a figure carefully passed through the garden's trail and arrived by the perimeter walls before flipping over it. He had a broad forehead with raven black hair and stern brown eyes. He was none other than Butler Walter. He's agile and his motions are fluid. If he's not trained, he's a low-sequence beyonder. Klein observed the scene as he made a preliminary judgment. He saw Walter's shadows follow the streets until he arrived at the manhole which Hazel often used to enter the sewers. He removed the manhole cover, climbed down, and didn't forget to close the cover. Why is everyone so skilled at getting into the sewers? Mr. Butler likely hasn't done it in the past, otherwise, my spirituality would have warned me. After all, he's leaving from my territory. It means that before he became my butler, he had performed such actions quite frequently elsewhere. Klein curled his lips, returned to his bedside, and took out the iron cigar case from under his pillow. He controlled Race Senor to tail Walter, wanting to see what he was up to. I hope it doesn't exceed 100 meters, otherwise, I'll need to enter the sewers as well. As Klein silently muttered to himself, he returned to the gap in the curtains. His marionette, Senor, immediately used the mysterious connection between different mirrors to jump to the street lamp beside the manhole before passing the manhole to silently tail Walter. Klein saw that Walter turned into a more secluded and dark passage after taking 10 meters forward. On the wall were all kinds of moss and dirt. Suddenly, the butler stopped and said to someone, "Why? Were you so rash? Why didn't you wait for a better opportunity?" Soon, a weak and slightly hoarse female's voice replied to Walter's inquiry. "It was the best opportunity. Once he returns to that manor, there's no knowing when he will come out again." "But why would you be so seriously injured?" Walter said with sighs of concern. The female voice scoffed and said, "William Sykes is stronger than what you or I imagined. Perhaps only this way can he satisfy his secret identity. Regardless, I finally obtained clues from him. After so much time, I finally have a chance to approach the truth. You didn't need to be so rash." Walter fell silent. The weak female's voice chuckled and said, "I've already sold my soul to an evil god. The only meaning to life is vengeance." In a rare instance, Walter sighed and said, "Continue hiding here. I'll prepare food for you until you recover. If there aren't any accidents, use the old method to contact me." The weak female voice remained silent for a while before saying, "When he was alive, he had many subordinates who claimed to be loyal. After his death, few still remember him or are willing to risk their lives for him. You are the one who has surprised me the most. He is the first noble who treated me that way, and he is the person I'm truly loyal to," Walter answered in a deep voice. Having heard the conversation with his marionette, Klein vaguely understood the entire story. After Prince Edisac passed away, a few of his loyal subordinates were investigating the truth of his suicide. Walter was one of them. However, he was mainly in charge of gathering any superficial intelligence, as well as using his identity to provide some help. This is probably the additional development that Aurora mentioned. Klein immediately made Senor go invisible as he infiltrated the secluded passageway and saw Walter conversing with someone while standing. His figure blocked a black-dressed woman who was seated on the ground against the wall. Her face was somewhat pale. After the woman heard Walter's words, she gave a throaty laugh and looked towards the entrance. "It's time you leave. Don't be caught by others." She turned her head, allowing Klein to see her. She had a round face, slender eyes, and a gentle and refined temperament. Deep down, she was sweet and was an outstandingly gorgeous beauty who Klein was familiar with. Trissy Cheek. She isn't dead? She managed to escape? She's actually trying to seek revenge for Prince Edisac? At that moment that he saw Trissy, Klein nearly lost control of his expression. Although he had guessed it based on the conversation, he still felt it exceeded his expectations when the truth was placed before him. Without even the need for a dream divination, he could still recall the great smog of Backland. Trissy had conversed with him, and back then, she was eager to escape Prince Edisac's control and escape the manipulation of her fate by the hidden person behind the scenes. She felt her daily life was filled with pain. This demoness who was once a man had sold her soul to an evil god to help avenge Prince Edisac. What kind of crappy trite romance plot point is this? The corners of Klein's lips twitched as he saw Walter throw a bag of food to Trissy. After hearing him give a few words of advice, he turned and left the secluded path. At this moment, a figure appeared from Member of Parliament Mock's house. It was within Klein's line of sight from where he was standing. It followed the shadows in the street as it quickly approached the entrance to the sewer. She was none other than Hazel, who held a mystical item from the Marauder pathway. She'll encounter Walter. This isn't some entrance to the sewers. It's clearly the entrance to a bustling city. Klein looked down and nearly facepalmed. Upon arriving at the manhole, Hazel warily observed her surroundings for a few seconds before moving the cover away and climbing down. The entire process was done in one fell swoop without any signs of delay. Stepping onto the slightly moist ground, she followed the rusted metal pipes and the sewage that slowly flowed with a clear destination in mind. Suddenly, she felt her back turn cold as a chill ran down her spine. Her hair began to stand on end. Right on the heels of that, Hazel seemed to plunge into a freezing river, and she felt a coldness that was overcoming her body. She was horrified to see herself walking in a different direction, heading straight for the wall with metal pipes. And this was completely against her will. Horror filled Hazel's mind before she received a reprieve from her numb thoughts. She infused all her spirituality into the necklace on her neck. The 7 green gems on the necklace were equidistant from each other. Embedded around them were tiny diamonds. In the absolute darkness, they still swirled with a faint lustrous glow. Suddenly, a gem lit up as the green glow illuminated Hazel's ghastly face. She leaned against the wall and paused for a moment. She moved her feet forward in an awkward manner before retracting them. At that instant, the coldness Hazel felt had paused for a moment. She didn't hesitate to use her spirituality to light up another green gem. She raised her right hand, aimed it at herself, and twisted her wrist. At the same time, many mysterious symbols and patterns appeared in her mind as her spirituality and voice changed momentarily. She had stolen the beyond her power, Wraith shriek. Hazel was just about to open her mouth to shout when she found her hands losing control again. She forcefully and quickly covered her mouth with her hands. Her shriek turned into a muffle as she took a few brisk steps to the wall. She turned into another fork before crouching down in the pure darkness. She tried hard to struggle, but it was useless. She wasn't even capable of activating the necklace on her neck. Hazel's dark brown eyes widened as they filled with horror and indignation. Tears began to well in her eyes before slowly streaming down her cheeks. And at this moment, Walter had come out from another path, returning back to the sewer entrance before climbing up agilely. After he sneaked back into 160 Buckland Street, Hazel suddenly regained control of her body. She felt that the coldness had completely disappeared. She first raised her hands in surprise, using her night vision to take a glance. Following that, she looked around in a fluster, as though there were countless unknown monsters hidden in the darkness of the sewers. Hazel immediately touched the necklace with her right hand, carefully stood up, and headed for the entrance. She didn't flee in panic, but she instead warily prepared for any attack that would appear from the darkness. Finally, she returned to Buckland Street where she saw the black street lamp emitting its light, illuminating the streets that still had the remnant signs of rain. Only then did Hazel speed up her pace and run home. Midway, she suddenly turned back, nervously and frantically closing the manhole's cover. After doing all of this, she followed the shadows and entered her garden. With the help of the gas and water pipes, she entered the balcony to her bedroom. Only at that point did she really have any room to think. She widened her eyes and subconsciously looked around. Slowly, her body began to tremble. She raised her left arm, hoping to use her clothes to wipe her face, but she paused midway, switching to using a handkerchief from her pocket. Hazel still has the basic abilities needed to react. She's not a complete newbie. In the sewers, Senor appeared with his dark red coat and triangular hat as he spoke silently. Following that, under Klein's control, he went invisible again as he entered the hidden fork where Trissy was. Just as the wraith approached, the black-dressed Trissy looked up and revealed a weak but stubborn smile. From the looks of it, you have no ill intentions. That lady was quite lucky. She had sensed Hazel and discovered the wraith. Senor's figure appeared as he chuckled. Perhaps killing her will only bring you greater trouble. To be honest, he wished to report Trissy to the authorities because he knew of the evil deeds she had done. He knew how she had incited the passengers and crew on the Alfalfa, causing them to kill each other out at sea. He also knew how she had many innocent lives die ahead of time. However, after realizing that Trissy was investigating the mystery behind Prince Edisac's death, Klein had a new plan in mind. He would incite the demoness and cooperate with her on certain matters. The mystery of Prince Edisac's death was equivalent to the truth of the Great Smog of Backland. Investigating this matter is bound to be very dangerous. Roping others in will make me feel guilty, afraid that harm or even death will happen to them as a result. By getting Trissy to do it, I wouldn't have such a psychological burden. The crimes she had committed had long doomed her to hell. The only problem is that she might be using the investigations of the mystery to Prince Edisac's death for her own ploys. I have to be wary about this to prevent myself from being used, thus causing a disaster. As Klein thought, he made Seigneur take 2 steps forward. Trissy looked at the middle-aged before her and chuckled. Since you have ill intentions, go ahead, Mr. Seigneur. At this instant, the marionette's senses revealed countless threads floating and flailing around Trissy. And seated in the middle was her black-dressed self with a pale face. It resembled a spider in the middle of her web, but it was filled with temptation and pity that made one approach her. You know me? The marionette halted in his footsteps. Trissy's expression was somewhat adrift as she answered in reverie, I once spent an unforgettable period of time at sea. Back then, you were still a man. Klein lampooned and chuckled. Why are you investigating Prince Edisac's death? Didn't he commit suicide? Trissy immediately looked up as anger colored her face. Suicides can be different. Some people do it willingly, others are forced. No way, she really seems to mind Prince Edisac's death. Lady, have you forgotten that you were once a man? Have you forgotten the pain you were previously talking about? Don't tell me that this is the so-called Stockholm syndrome where you end up bonding with your captor due to the minute amount of kindness they provided? Well, I'm not a spectator, and I can't determine if she's being truthful or not. Klein made Seigneur chuckle. So, you believe that Prince Edisac was forced to commit suicide? You sought William Sykes to investigate this matter? The angry look on Trissy's face vanished as a miserable but beautiful smile appeared. That's right. It was he who forced Edisac to commit suicide with a spirituality obliteration bullet. However, he was also under orders by others. To obtain the final bit of pleasure, he revealed everything. He was still unable to really touch me. I even showed him my former photo. He died filled with even more misery and despair. I can't imagine what William suffered. Trissy is as twisted as she was before. Demonesses at the stage of pleasure are really filled with charms. Every expression and every action are filled with enticement. But I can tell that Trissy has already reined it in very well, only using it when needed. She has already advanced? Or is it because of love? As Klein lampooned, he made Seigneur ask, who is it? When asking that question, Klein hadn't expected to receive an answer, but Trissy chuckled and replied, Viscount Stratford. The Royal Guard Captain of the Royal Family. Viscount Stratford. Royal Guard Captain of the Royal Family. From this post, the Great Smog of Backland does have inklings of a particular royal family faction being behind it. As for who it is, it will require investigation. Klein temporarily didn't have the time to verify Trissy's answer, so all he did was make Seigneur scoff. I'm a little doubtful since you are telling me this so easily. Trissy said in a scoffing and self-deprecating manner, that's because it's something good for me. I can tell that you and the faction you represent are very interested in the true motives of those pulling the strings of the royal family. I would be very happy if I can provide some useful clues that cause you to have conflict with them, causing the real conspirer to surface. This will aid in my revenge and also be of the greatest help to me. According to this logic, does that also mean that I can use you to investigate this matter and fish out the mastermind behind this? From that, I can allow my faction to hide in safety before it obtains any actual information. Wasn't what Trissy said meant to entice me to engage in limited cooperation with her, while she also volunteers to be the mind clearer in order to reveal the truth. She is clearly expressing her value. She's afraid that I'll eventually decide to kill her. Klein roughly understood what Trissy was truly getting at as he controlled the wraith to say, very reasonable. I should also do the same. I believe that without my threats or enticement, you'll attempt to make contact with Viscount Stratford after you recover from your wounds. Trissy curled her lips and said, I only hope that he doesn't like men. This isn't something that cannot be resolved. If you're already sequence 5, then you can consider switching to the Hunter Pathways sequence for Iron-Blooded Knight. Also, have you forgotten your past self? Why are you getting used to the powers of a demoness of pleasure to deal with men? Klein lampooned before making Senior smile. This isn't a problem. You can always show him your old photo. Trissy was taken aback as a slightly twisted expression colored her face. A humiliation that she had buried deep inside her had been dug out, exposing it beneath the sun. Her beautiful eyes were tainted with what stemmed from anger from the humiliation. Her face, which was pale due to her injuries, instantly flushed red. Trissy quickly reined in her emotions and scoffed, speaking with a suppressed voice, as expected of Admiral of Blood. It appears you know plenty about the Demoness pathway. She wasn't sure before. I made that joke because I thought the Demoness sect and the Rose School of Thought had worked together, making her believe that Admiral of Blood would know the secret of the assassin pathway. Regardless, it's not nice mocking the gender of others. This is in line with Admiral of Blood's persona. A marionettist's principle is remember that every marionette has its own setting? The reason why Trissy had mentioned her past photo was apparently just to vent and grind off an enemy's joy and excitement. She wasn't taking notice of the details she mentioned. Klein nodded in thought as he controlled Senor. At my level, there will always be plenty of secrets I know. He didn't continue on the topic as he said, how can I contact you? I might be able to provide you with some help during the investigations of Viscount Stratford. Trissy reached her hand towards her ear and grabbed a clump of smooth, raven-black hair. Then, blue ice formed, allowing her to crack it off. She then spread out her palm, allowing a silent, pitch-black flame to appear, burning the hair to ashes. These ashes weren't lifted up by the cold winds in the sewers, but they had shrunk, forming a sticky black object. Smear it uniformly over a mirror, and then I'll know that you're looking for me. I'll subsequently use that mirror to communicate with you. Trissy shook her wrist and threw the pasty black object to Senor. It can be used about 5 times, and that should be enough. As Senor was only a marionette, Klein wasn't worried about letting him grab the black sticky object. After taking a few looks, he stuffed it into his pocket. Trissy fell silent for a few seconds before biting her lip. If I need your help, how do I contact you? That's a problem. Klein did wish to have her directly contact Miss Messenger, Rionette Tinker. After all, Trissy would later know that behind the wraith was Gehrman Sparrow if she gathered any news about Admiral of Blood. This wasn't something that could be hidden. After a few seconds of consideration, he decided to be a little more cautious. He decided to wait until Trissy had any substantial discoveries before changing the communication method. After all, she isn't someone to be trusted. To avenge Prince Edisac, some of her feelings are real, but they likely include some other goals, for example, seeking revenge for herself. Klein made Senor survey the area and said, these sewers hide plenty of secrets. I'll come often. You can leave the help you need in text form here. If the matter is urgent, preventing you from doing it in time, you can contact that person from before to get him to leave the message. Trissy slowly nodded. Okay. With the conversation almost done, Klein planned on letting his marionette, Senor, leave. At that moment, he caught sight of Trissy's hands. He discovered that the sapphire ring, which was equivalent to a grade 0 sealed artifact, was gone. I noticed it just now, but I thought she had switched it to her other hand or another finger, but it's actually gone. From the looks of it, she paid a considerable price back when she escaped Prince Edisac's Red Rose Manor and escaped in Sangwill's 0-08's control. The mark that the Prince Edisac left on her has also vanished? Klein thought for a moment before getting Senor to laugh. One more thing. Which evil god did you sell your soul to? Trissy gave the middle-aged man a deep look. The primordial demoness. Weren't you trying to escape from that strange state? Didn't you feel that you were increasingly becoming less like yourself? Why did you backtrack? Don't you know that by changing your name to Trissy Cheek, they were trying to make you the primordial demoness vessel? No, she might really not know. She might not even know what cheek means. She did her best to escape her fate, only to plunge deeper into it. At that instant, Klein felt a baffling fear towards fate and deities. He made Senior smile. It's hard for me to believe it with you replying so easily without any qualms. Trissy's eyes had a slight tinge of confusion as she said in a self-deprecating manner, that's because it's a problem for me, not a secret. With one more person knowing, there might be one more chance of a solution presenting itself. Even if the chances are slim, it's better than nothing. While solving the problem, there's also a high chance that you'll be finished. Klein didn't continue the topic as he said after some thought, when you approach Viscount Stratford and the mastermind behind all of this, take note of any coincidences that often happen around you. The deeper the investigation into the Great Smog of Backland is, the more likely it would gain the attention of Nsangwil and 0-08. Coincidences. Trissy was taken aback as she repeated the word. At that instant, she recalled all the coincidences she had encountered back at Red Rose Manor. Amidst her thoughts, she suddenly looked up, only to realize that Admiral of Blood Senior had vanished. The next morning, Klein woke up punctually, and with the assistance of Richardson, he wore his coat. Just as he arrived in the dining hall, he saw Walter standing by the door, politely awaiting his arrival. Sir, your schedule for today is to participate in a tea session at Member of Parliament Mock's residence. Walter professionally reminded his employer. He was stern, old-fashioned, and conscientious. He looked no different from his usual self, making it impossible to tell that he had headed for the sewers in the middle of the night. Klein nodded with a smile as though nothing had happened. I haven't forgotten. He then entered the dining hall and enjoyed an exquisite meal that had started showing signs of being repetitive. There's not enough variety for breakfast. Klein focused on eating, and after he was done, he put down his cutlery and sighed. I miss my hometown a little. Get the cook to prepare some desi pie tomorrow. Yes, sir. I should have thought of that earlier, housekeeper Tanaja replied apologetically. Klein waved his hand as a gesture for her not to take it to heart before he headed to the garden for a stroll. After doing all of this, he returned to the third story to continue reading the papers he hadn't finished until his etiquette teacher, Wiana, arrived. Wiana was still dressed decently with an elegant bearing. She smiled at Dwayne Dantes and said, I heard you would be heading to Mam Rihanna's place for high tea later today. Then, this lesson will focus on high tea. Klein maintained his smile as he listened attentively, asking questions from time to time. About 30 minutes later, Walter knocked on the door and entered. Sir, Member of Parliament Mock's servant just came over to inform us that the high tea session has been cancelled because Mam Rihanna's daughter, Miss Hazel, is sick. She's very apologetic for that, and she wishes to invite you again next week. Hazel is sick? A result of last night's fright? It's not impossible if it's an ordinary person, but a beyonder has their physical qualities enhanced. The chances of that happening are very low. Furthermore, Hazel clearly hasn't seen the changes that result from the loss of control brought about by potions. Her mental state is still well, allowing her to feel a sense of superiority and having no fear. Even if she was frightened, it wouldn't result in any psychological ailments. Ailments. Sequence 5 of the Demoness pathway can make people around them get infected with ailments. Last night, Trissy secretly released her ailment after seeing a stranger enter the sewers. And as a wraith, Senior wasn't affected, so I didn't discover it. Such a problem isn't too serious. Hazel didn't spend much time in the area for too long. She's just a little shaken, preventing her from recovering quickly. From the looks of it, Trissy has really advanced to Sequence 5. Klein nodded gently and said, Please give Miss Hazel my regards. Without the high tea session, Klein decided to pray at St. Samuel Cathedral, so as to show his devoutness. Of course, he didn't forget to stop and admire the white pigeons on the square, allowing himself to appear leisurely and calm. He entered the cathedral, passing through the murals that were illuminated by the sun from high above and arriving at a dark and deep prayer hall. This place wasn't as gorgeously decorated like the other churches that had all kinds of dazzling elegant taste that produced a visual impact. Instead, it was mild and peaceful, allowing one to feel a natural sense of tranquility. As for the pure light that resembled twinkling stars up ahead, they were filled with the intense solemnity of holiness. Klein removed his hat and handed it to Richardson along with his cane. Then, he walked down the aisle. At this moment, two figures stood up in the front pew and turned towards the entrance. One of them was the black-haired, green-eyed Leonard Mitchell who looked suave with his untidy hair. Almost at the same moment, Leonard Mitchell also saw the middle-aged man with the white sideburns and deep blue eyes. Dwayne Dantes. He tensed up momentarily as his body showed signs of indiscernible stiffness. Klein gave Leonard a side look as he nodded with a smile. He had a friendly and casual expression. Leonard forced a smile as he nodded in a slightly sluggish manner. Following that, he turned to the side, made way, and brushed shoulders with Dwayne Dantes. This made Klein see who the person was behind him. It was also someone he knew, Daly, who was wearing a spirit medium's black robe. This lady still wore blue eyeshadow and blush, presenting quite an uncanny sense of beauty. Daly glanced at the middle-aged gentleman when her expression suddenly went adrift. She retracted her gaze as she silently approached the exit. No way, I was just mimicking Captain's profound eyes. Even the color is different, yet Ma'am Daly could still find it familiar? A woman's intuition is truly terrifying. Klein had a vague guess when he noticed Daly's brief abnormality. A long time ago, as an insensitive man, he believed that Ma'am Daly was secretly in love with Captain, otherwise, she wouldn't have endured the risk to rush to Tingen to get Klein to find an opportunity to teach the acting method to Dunn Smith. As for Captain, Klein wasn't sure about his thoughts. After all, Dunn Smith, at that moment, was often unable to distinguish reality from a dream. His bad memory was rather pronounced, and he might unknowingly have forgotten certain things that lay at the bottom of his heart. However, Captain often mentions Ma'am Daly, using her as an example to educate us. He was so familiar with how many years she took to advance and the kind of talent she had that it seemed like he had memorized it. Yes, whenever Captain mentioned these matters, he would occasionally add that he spent 9 years going from midnight poet to nightmare. See, could it be that he was feeling a little inferior when facing Ma'am Daly? Inferior. Klein recalled the past as his mood suddenly felt dampened. He realized that he didn't really understand Dunn Smith. He didn't understand how many things the man had hidden inwardly. And Ma'am Daly isn't much younger than him. She appears to be very open and doesn't care about marriage. Klein silently sighed and reined in his thoughts. He found a nearby pew and bowed his head, closing his eyes to pray. Outside the prayer hall, Leonard had recovered as he gathered with the other Red Gloves teammates with Daly. They waited for a while as Soist, who had become a spirit warlock, walked out from another side. He scanned them and said, "Our mission this time is to use the various clues discovered from the explosion of the Black Skeleton Gang's headquarters to find all the formal members of the numinous episcopate in Backland. Ma'am Daly is a beyonder from the corpse collector pathway. She knows quite a bit about the numinous episcopate, so His Grace, St. Anthony, has gotten her to assist us." In the evening, Klein, who had dismissed Richardson, took 4 steps counterclockwise and entered above the grey fog. He conjured the World Gehrman Sparrow and made his blurry figure pray. "Please inform Miss Magician that she needs to reserve a hotel room before Friday night. It's best that it's far from the place where Mr. X holds the gathering. Pass me the stone and spellbook ahead of time. I need to make certain preparations. On Friday night, she needs to stop her friend who participates in Mr. X's gathering and also present to me that person's external appearance when in disguise. If there's anything else, I'll inform her in time." With only 2 days left before the assassination attempt on Mr. X, Klein undoubtedly needed to prepare ahead of time. And there were many things that needed preparation. Dwayne Dantes wasn't able to do everything, so he had to rely on Miss Magician. His preliminary plan was to use the powers of a faceless to disguise himself as a participant in Mr. X's gathering. He would enter directly with the passcode, and then he would employ different plans based on the situation. According to the experience he had in engaging in combat and controlling his marionette, Klein had a feeling that a marionettist's principle was try to hide behind the scenes, covertly directing a script. Unless necessary, a marionettist had to avoid engaging in direct combat with others. Currently, the most troublesome point is that Mr. X's gathering is at 8. And usually, at this time, Dwayne Dantes clearly wouldn't have fallen asleep. He won't be able to escape the notice of his butler and servants and secretly head to Eastborough. Of course, on the contrary, it can also create an alibi, but the problem is, what method should I use to fool everyone in his house? If only I had a faceless partner who can act as Dwayne Dantes. Miss Justice's necklace can do it, but she's not in Backland. Klein leaned back into his chair as he rubbed his temples. He had even considered directly summoning and responding to himself, using his identity as Hero Bandit Black Emperor to carry out the operation, but doing so would cause him to lose the ability to change his physical appearance. It also made it difficult for him to possess others and disguise as Furz's friend to participate in the gathering. Unless Miss Magician's friend is a part of this, allowing me to possess him or her. That wouldn't do either. First, it will expose some of the Tarot Club's secrets, and second, Mr. X might have the means to discover a wraith. Of course, traces of this can be concealed using a series of seals with a gold coin, the paper angel, or the iron cigar case. Klein considered for a while before deciding on a method he was very proficient in from his previous life. Feigning sickness. I'll begin acting sick tomorrow. I'll eat very little, and sleep before 8. This way, the butler and servants wouldn't disturb me. But if there's an emergency, what do I do when Walter and company knock on the door? A magician's illusion creation can only fool the eyes. It isn't some artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence. Right, I can fix the illusion onto a mirror, letting it look like Dwayne Dantes. Then, I'll get a Rhodes to answer remotely. With this in mind, Klein's thoughts suddenly opened up. I have to say that a Rhodes can be quite useful at times. After a poignant comment, Klein returned to the real world. He walked to the desk, took out pen and paper, and began drawing a picture comprising of symbols that implied secrecy and mystery prying. Just as he finished his final stroke, the room's lighting dimmed suddenly. The full-body mirror first turned deep black before silver light surfaced. Loanese text appeared one after another. Great Master, your loyal and humble servant, Rhodes, heard your summoning. Was I late? There's something new every time. Klein shook his head in amusement. No. How tolerant you are of me, Great Master. You can ask your question. Words neatly appeared on the mirror. Klein thought for a moment before saying, I plan on eliminating the Aurora Order Oracle, Mr. X. Do you have any suggestions? The full-body mirror's words froze for a few seconds before changing. It's best you do it after Thursday. It's in line with my divination. Angel of Fate Ouroboros or a saint of the Aurora Order might be around Mr. X tonight and on Thursday. Klein smiled and said, Rhodes, I have something that requires your help. This is my honor. You are giving me an opportunity. Words quickly emerged, fully professing what it meant to be excited and delighted. May I ask what the mission is? Klein nodded and said, this Friday night, I will be using a mirror as an illusion prop, changing it to look like my present identity. If any emergencies happen, you're in charge of controlling the mirror to answer without letting anyone discover any abnormalities. Can you do it? The air around the full-body mirror suddenly gushed around, and a toady voice belonging to Dwayne Dantes sounded. Great Master, I'll try my best to complete anything you command. Although it won't be able to last long, and it doesn't match my usual habits, it's enough to deal with everyone here. If you wish, I can simulate any voice. You're more talented than I expected. It's not easy being a mirror these days. However, why does that final statement sound odd? Klein's facial muscles trembled as he said, when dealing with them, hide the nature of the question and answer game. Don't let others notice it. Rhodes immediately presented a new sentence on the full-body mirror. I will play your identity well. Very good. Klein nodded. He was truly worried that Rhodes would begin asking butler Walter and valet Richardson embarrassing questions. Questions like, have you fantasized about ladies you shouldn't have any urges for? Or, who do you think of late at night when resolving your physical needs? He believed that with the magic mirror's way of doing things, it might very well carry out such an act without any forewarning. Back then, Danitz nearly broke down thanks to its questions. Without speaking any further, Klein switched to saying, that will be all for today. I'll contact you again on Friday night. Yes, great master. Your humble servant already looks forward to serving you. Rhodes first conjured a single line before producing a drawing of a hand waving. On Friday afternoon, Klein, who had skipped a literary salon because of his feigned sickness, arrived above the gray fog once again. In front of him was a hard-covered, palm-sized notebook which was bronze green in color. It was Laymanos' travels which the magician Furs had provided. After flipping the item which was closer to a spellbook over to a certain page, Klein looked at the yellowish-brown page, raised his hand, and summoned the sea god's scepter from the junk pile. As he injected some of his spirituality into Laymanos' travels, making it light up with a faint luster, he made the blue gem on the scepter's tip emit a bright light. A sizzling sound was produced as bolts of silver lightning appeared out of thin air. They were thick and menacing as they zapped about, meshing together to form a hurricane. At the same time, complicated symbols and labels quickly outlined themselves on the page of Laymanos' travels. They overlapped each other and fused together, slowly taking shape. Just as the page was about to be colored in silver, bolts of lightning snaked out from it, causing all the patterns to be destroyed. It failed again. Klein sighed silently as he repeated the same process. This wasn't his first attempt. Ever since he obtained Laymanos' travels on Wednesday night, he would head above the gray fog from time to time, using this spellbook to record the powers produced by the sea god's scepter. He repeated it until his spirituality was nearly drained, forcing him to return to the real world to take a break. During this process, there were successes and failures. Klein relied on repeated attempts before completing the final step, recording the lightning storm spell which he had eyed for a very long time. This was a demigod power of the sailor pathway. Before that failure, Klein had failed nearly 20 times. It could be said that his luck was terrible. After repeated failures, he was delighted to see a silver luster spread across the yellowish page at the 5th attempt. An ancient, mysterious, complicated, and indescribable symbol contracted, forming a fancy diagram that made anyone who placed their eyes on it feel as though they were being struck by lightning. Phew! I've finally succeeded. Klein rubbed his fingers against the paper and heaved a long sigh of relief. He flipped through Laymanos' travels and admired his previous efforts. Over the past 2 days, he wasn't fully caught up with Lightning Storm. He also recorded 2 other demigod powers. One of them was Paper Angel that he had used while stirring some of the powers above the gray fog. It aided in disrupting any divination and prophecies. Similarly, there was Hurricane that stemmed from the sea god's scepter. When recording them, Klein was rather lucky. One took 9 times, while the other took 12 before he succeeded. As for Flight, Glide, Lightning Strike, and other powers that didn't reach sequence 4, they only required him to do it once or twice. Therefore, Klein had almost filled the entire book. This spellbook isn't very useful to unaffiliated Beyonders. It needs plenty of time and patience to record a sufficient number of powers. And when the powers exceed sequence 6, the chances of failure increases, making the powers difficult to obtain. However, there are 22 pathways in the mystical domain. If the first few sequences have their powers matched well, finishing off a sequence 5 isn't too surprising. Klein closed Laymanos' travels and sighed inwardly. From his point of view, the spellbook was equivalent to half a divine artifact for unaffiliated Beyonders. Although it was more difficult to be useful than Creeping Hunger in its early stages, once there was a good combination, it was quite normal for one to fight someone of a higher sequence. However, among Beyonders who were supported by major factions, Laymanos' travels would be ridiculously powerful. This was because it could record a demigod's powers. As long as they wish, a demigod can repeat the power again and again. As for creeping hunger, it has a high chance of failing to devour a demigod. Even a real shepherd would find it extremely difficult to graze a high-sequence beyonder. Firstly, there are no available resources, and secondly, it's easy to lose control. Elder Lovia from the City of Silver was someone lucky enough to be able to graze a sequence 4 evil spirit. When Klein thought of this, he cast his gaze onto a dark green, coarse stone. It was rough and uneven with signs of burn marks. It was none other than Furz's stone that allowed the traversal of the spirit world. With Laymanos travels and this stone, along with the Luck Siphon Charm and Wraith Marionette, even if Mr. X has a saint protecting him, I should still be able to complete the mission and leave without problems. Klein rubbed his temples and returned to the real world. After setting up a bestowment ritual, he brought the corresponding items back. After making all the preparations, he walked to the full-body mirror and looked at himself. He made himself look haggard. After dinner, Klein had used the excuse of not being well to return to his room. After taking in the night scenery, he took out a palm-sized mirror from the drawer and placed it on the soft and elastic pillow. Then, Klein went over, making the mirror reflect the blue-eyed, white-sideburned Dwayne Dantes. He then slowly straightened his body and took a step back, creating another Dwayne Dantes in bed. This gentleman was wearing silk pajamas and leaning against a pillow. He held a book in hand with his eyes half closed as though he was in thought. Not bad, the mirror illusion isn't weaker than a paper figurine illusion. Klein returned to the desk and picked up a fountain pen, drawing the strange symbol that was a mixture of secrecy and mystery prying. After a brief silence, the Dwayne Dantes in bed suddenly opened his eyes and gave a toady smile. Great Master, your loyal and humble servant, Aurora, is here. I have to say that even with Dwayne Dantes' face, there's no way he can look normal with that kind of smile. Klein silently sighed and nearly turned to look to his side. Very good, he praised with a nod. He didn't give any other instructions. With a half-top hat, he slid down from the balcony to the first floor. He followed the secluded garden trail and flipped over the corner perimeter wall of 160 Buckland Street. During this process, he hadn't forgotten to close the windows. Pressing his right hand on his hat and landing his feet on the streets, Klein slowly looked up. At some point in time, his facial features and outline had changed. He had black hair and brown eyes, with a thin and angular face. This was the crazy adventurer, Gehrman Sparrow, who had a bounty of 50,000 pounds from just a single country. The hunt was about to begin. Sherwood Beyonder. Zio, who was just about to head out to East Borough to participate in Mr. X's Beyonder gathering, was stopped by Furz. You want to head out to gather material? Zio deliberated before saying the words her friend often used. Furz stroked her hair and said, No, to earn money. I previously accepted a mission to find the dust left behind after a ghost fades away. As you know, there aren't any ghosts at the cemetery. They've all been given a send-off by the priests and bishops to their respective deities' kingdom. Therefore, I can only head over to East Borough and find targets that died due to various reasons without being discovered. Can you bear letting such a beautiful and frail lady like me head into such a messy place alone? But, can't you push it back a day? Zio said hesitantly. I'm planning to participate in Mr. X's gathering. Furz immediately shook her head. No, I need to complete the mission tomorrow. It's a total of 50 pounds. If it's due tomorrow, why didn't you do it the past few days? Zio looked suspiciously at her friend. Furz chuckled. Is this your first day? Knowing me? Don't you know I have a severe case of procrastination? Besides, you have no money. What's the point of going to Mr. X's gathering? You don't even know what Beyonder ingredients you need. That's true. Zio was convinced before she smiled. Does every author have a sickness of procrastination? Probably. As Furz perfunctorily replied, she secretly heaved a sigh of relief. In the East Borough, inside a cheap motel, Klein entered the room which Miss Magician had reserved for him under a fake alias. Here, having a room and a bed for one person was an extravagance, but even so, such rooms only cost 12 pence a night. Of course, many of the cheap motels in East Borough didn't have any single rooms. The best of them were some compartments that cost 5 pence a night. It only had a bed and a partition that blocked others from looking inside, allowing the occupants to change clothes. As for the 10 to 20 bunk beds in the basement, they cost 1.5 pence a night. The motel didn't hold any responsibilities for the items that one stored there. There's actually a mirror. Not bad. Klein put down his hat and stood in front of a full-body mirror filled with crevices. He then wore the hooded robe which Miss Magician had prepared for him. Immediately after that, his body shrank at a discernible pace. His skin gradually turned pale with a tinge of malt colors. The Adam's apple at his throat vanished as his hair grew long and turned blonde. Klein instantly recognized the image of Furz's friend, even though the disguise didn't show her looks. It was Miss Zio. However, because there was a hood to conceal himself, he didn't really transform into a woman. All he did was handle the easily noticeable spots. I can't do anything about the height of 150 centimeters. I'll need to digest the entirety of my potion before I can reach this limit. Thankfully, Miss Zio disguises herself by raising her height. I don't have to vex over this. Klein looked at the 160-centimeter tall figure in the mirror, switched to a pair of leather boots that looked to be and was flat-soled. After donning the disguise, Klein hooded himself and silently left the single room from the window. He came to an alley in East Borough, taking a detour until he arrived outside the building where Mr. X was hosting the Beyonder gathering. After recalling the passcode which Miss Magician had provided, Klein rapped the door with his fingers, 3 light taps and 3 heavy taps, separated by 2 long and 3 short intervals. After 10 seconds, the door silently opened. An attendant wearing an iron mask first observed the visitor before making way. Klein calmly walked past him and entered the building without showing any signs of panic. While passing through the living room, Klein's spiritual perception was triggered. He felt that there was an invisible gaze scanning him from an unknown location. He feigned ignorance as he entered the activity room ahead. He surveyed the area and found a spot that wasn't too far or close to the host's seat. And at the moment he passed through the activity room's door, all the attention on him vanished. If not for the wraith having 3 seals to isolate it, it probably would have been noticed. Mr. X doesn't appear to be as bold and crazy as he seems. Klein sat down and moved his hood, hiding his face deeper in the shadows. After about 10 minutes, when most of the members had arrived, a brass mask-wearing Mr. X appeared by the door without causing a commotion. He walked in and headed towards his seat. He was dressed in a black classical robe with a pointed mage hat. As he walked, he had a converged aura, but it was enough to make everyone present bow their heads without realizing it. Turning around and slowly taking his seat, Mr. X surveyed the room and said in a deep voice, "Let's begin." He's within 4 meters. Klein wasn't in a rush to take action. He retracted his gaze and patiently watched as a few gathering members exchanged information about people with abnormal luck for money. Occasionally, Mr. X would reply. Time ticked by as the gathering's focus went from Mr. X's act of handing out rewards to the transactions between the members. Klein didn't hesitate as he tapped his left thumb on the first segment of his index finger twice, activating his spirit body threads vision. Illusory black threads immediately surfaced before his eyes as they emanated from the bodies of different people, out into the void towards some boundless distance. After making a simple distinction of the threads, Klein began to secretly control Mr. X's spirit body threads. There were 2 difficulties to this mission according to his plan. The first was that having astrologer as one of the earlier jobs in his pathway, Mr. X, or the other hidden Aurora Order saint might be able to sense the danger when he began controlling the spirit body threads, acutely sensing some abnormality. Klein wasn't sure about Mr. X's spiritual intuition because back when Miss Sharon existed in a wraith state, she failed to notice marionettist Rosego's controlling of her spirit body threads. However, for a saint who was a demigod, a high-sequence beyonder who had obtained godhood, no special trait of this being would surprise Klein. It wasn't surprising if that being's spiritual intuition was triggered due to the changes in another person's spirit body threads. For other marionettists, they were probably helpless regarding this. but Klein was different. He had another identity as the Fool. He had the powers of the mysterious space above the gray fog to aid him, allowing him to rely on paper angels to produce interference and eliminate any hidden problems. The gathering continued without any abnormalities. More than 10 seconds passed as Klein was close to gaining initial control of Mr. X. There was only 3 seconds left, but this Aurora Order Oracle didn't notice at all. He continued observing the completion of another transaction with a deep look in his eyes, his thoughts a mystery. At the critical moment, Klein stopped. He barely maintained his progress as he extended his hand, reaching into the pocket of the hooded robe and touching the iron cigar case which had been sealed with a wall of spirituality. Klein moved his fingers, prodding it gently to remove the wall of spirituality, allowing it to disperse into a swirling wind inside his pocket. He pulled back his palm and waited for a few more seconds until Mr. X's gaze looked to the side before he continued controlling the spirit body threads. 2 seconds. 1 second. 0. Mr. X's thoughts turned sluggish as though someone had poured stirred cement onto him. An enemy. Danger. Slow thoughts appeared in his head as he quickly made his decision. He planned on seeking help from his subordinates and the entity who was watching in secret, and put up an effective resistance. At this moment, coldness drilled into his body, preventing his limbs and mouth from answering his will. Admiral of Blood, Senor. A wraith's possession. There were many flaws to a marionettist's control of spirit body threads. The biggest problem was the target immediately realizing that there was a problem once initial control was attained. They would then have the ability to carry out any contingencies. If it was one-on-one, without anyone around them, Klein could naturally use the target's increasingly impeded state to effectively disrupt and interfere with any resistance they put up, but if the target had any aids, it was very difficult for a marionettist's control to fool others. It required help from the environment, or partners to conceal the matter without exposing it. And on this point, a wraith who was able to possess a target and forcefully control them was the best support for a marionettist. The reason why Klein didn't directly enter a state of initial control was because he needed to release the wraith. After the initial inspection at the door, the vigilance in the activity room at the gathering location was definitely lower. Mr. X's eyes widened as his thoughts turned sluggish. His instinctive attempt to shout was blocked by his throat and mouth, silencing him completely. His attempt to raise his hands also slowed down as they reached for a porcelain teacup by his side. This completely violated his will. It was because of the cold aura that occupied every corner of his body. Wraith. Marionettist. No. If this continues, I'll die silently. Mr. X immediately controlled his spirituality as he constructed complicated symbols and labels in his mind. He was just about to open a traveler's door, which was also the door of teleportation, to escape the marionettist's control range. Compared to that, a wraith's possession was relatively less dangerous. But amidst his sluggish thoughts, the illusory symbols and labels failed to appear all at once. Instead, they appeared one stroke after another in a discontinuous manner and at an insufficient speed. Seizing this opportunity, Wraith Senor, who was possessing Mr. X, under marionettist Klein's control, simply moved Mr. X's head, changing his seating position. Such an action instantly interrupted the formation of the traveler's door. Oh no. My reaction is too slow. It will be interfered by the wraith. Use mystical item. Mr. X's eyes filled with blood, but none of his subordinates around him noticed it. Even the one watching in secret didn't notice any abnormalities. As for the gathering members who were interacting and trading, they lowered their voices because of his change in seating posture. At that moment, the activity room was filled with people. Although there were beyonders everywhere and many were his assistants, Mr. X found himself in extreme solitude and was helpless. He didn't even know who was attacking him or where the attacker was sitting. As the thoughts went through his mind, Mr. X regained control of his spirituality as he directed it towards the golden ring with an embedded ruby on his left index finger. However, going from a thought to a decision, and then going from a decision to an action took too long. It was as though he was acting out his thought processes in slow motion. This gave Senior plenty of time to raise Mr. X's left palm, bend his finger, and tap the side of his forehead, which was uncovered by the brass mask, as though in thought. It was a very faint tapping sound, and the strength used was quite significant, but under Klein's control, Senior held back perfectly. It made most of the strength enter Mr. X's mind without spreading outwards so as to hide any commotion. Tack. Tack. Mr. X's thoughts of emanating his spirituality were disrupted, and he was temporarily unable to find his train of thought. By the time he recovered, the marionettist's control had deepened. This made his thoughts chaotic and impeded. Even his thinking and decision-making became extremely difficult. With the wraith using all kinds of tiny, concealed actions to interfere with Mr. X's attempts to use his various beyonder powers and impressive mystical items, he slowly slid towards the abyss of becoming a marionette. He watched helplessly as he marched towards death slowly. Only then did he realize how terrifying and unsolvable the combination of a marionettist and wraith was. The hunt continued silently under everyone's noses. As Klein's control deepened, Mr. X's actions turned stiffer and sluggish. However, with the wraith possessing him, no one could notice any problems. To be precise, Mr. X's actions were no longer a result of the sluggish him, but from Wraith Senior. He wasn't even able to show the look of despair in his eyes. Amidst the transactions that either succeeded or failed, ranging from arguments to negotiations, 5 minutes quickly passed. Klein was just one last step from killing Mr. X and turning him into his marionette. However, he couldn't do so. This was because he had yet to digest much of the marionettist potion. He could only control one marionette at present, so if he wanted to convert Mr. X, he had to give up Wraith Senior. But once he gave up Senior, this Admiral of Blood who was long dead would immediately surface and be discovered by everyone. It would bring about extreme trouble. Similarly, if Klein didn't give up his Wraith marionette had and assassinated Mr. X while he wasn't able to resist, he needed to consider the Aurora Order Saint who was lurking in the shadows. This was the second most difficult part of his plan. To silently control Mr. X and remove his ability to resist wasn't difficult with the combination of marionettist and wraith. The way to kill him wasn't difficult as well. Mr. X in his present state could easily be finished off by Klein with an air bullet. The difficulty was in leaving safely after pulling off such a stunt. This actually required sufficient patience. Time slowly passed with Klein appearing calm despite his tense nerves. He pretended that he wasn't interested in the items that appeared as he kept silent the entire time. Finally, when the gathering came to an end, Mr. X said in a deep voice with complete normality, "The end." His words were succinct, just like the way he ended the previous gathering. This was what Zio described to Furs. As the gathering's members stood up one by one, Klein mixed in among them, looking inconspicuous. At the same time, he reached his hand into his pocket, and he flipped open Laymanos Travels based on his sense of touch. The 3 types of paper in Laymanos Travels clearly had different textures. The white paper that could only record sequence 7, 8, and 9 powers was thin, smooth and flat. The yellowish-brown goatskin which could record sequence 5 and 6 powers were very pliable like tanned leather. The 3 charred yellow pages that could record godhood powers were thick and textured. Together, they allowed someone to quickly distinguish between them simply from touch. Klein's fingers quickly found the thick and textured 3 pages as he gently pinched the middle page. Although his pocket wasn't large enough, preventing him from fully opening Laymanos Travels, the hooded robe was personally modified by Furs herself. The pocket had plenty of space, allowing the palm-sized spellbook to be flipped to a right angle. As Klein used his palm to prevent Laymanos Travels from closing, he used his finger to slide across the corresponding page's surface. The surface had slight bumps and depressions, making the strange patterns and symbols that were filled with mystery and ancient vibes be directly presented in his mind. He injected his spirituality into it. This charred yellow page recorded a demigod power of the storm pathway, Hurricane. Klein wanted to use it to create chaos, so as to interfere with the Aurora Order Saint who was lurking in the darkness. By doing so, he could seize the opportunity to assassinate Mr. X and escape with the help of the wind. Aside from this goal, the chaos could also effectively hide his tracks. By letting the members of the gathering scatter, and with everyone's identity being a mystery, doing so made everyone be a suspect. The Aurora Order would then find it difficult to pinpoint Zio. As his thoughts whirred, Klein locked his gaze onto a spot, and he slowly pulled out Laymanos' travels. Meanwhile, Mr. X took 2 steps to Klein's side, standing near him like he was a friend he hadn't seen in years. Following that, there was a loud buzz as a terrifying hurricane spiraled out of control in front of everybody. It was where Klein had targeted his spirituality at. The tables, coffee tables, sofa, and high-backed chairs in the room flew up as the violent hurricane ripped through the walls, carrying the roof away as it headed for the alley. Some of the gathering's participants were in the way of the hurricane and were thrown far away, while others fell forward due to the wind pressure as they ran in another direction. If Klein hadn't purposely controlled the timing and direction of the hurricane, not only would Mr. X's old house be destroyed, but even the series of condominiums around it would suffer damage. As for the gathering participants, they would have been swept up in the hurricane, having their survival depend solely on luck. The buzzing sounds quickly intensified as the hurricane that reached into the sky was like a terrifying giant. It stomped across the alley towards the street, leaving nothing behind in its wake. Klein was similarly swept up as he and the possessed Mr. X were thrown onto another street. During this process, as both of them were standing close to one another, along with how a wraith could float, these could control the target's body to a certain extent even with the hurricane. Therefore, the distance between Klein and Mr. X ultimately stayed within 5 meters. His control of the spirit body threads had never been terminated. In midair, with the howling winds in his ear, Klein suddenly yanked at his chest with his right hand, tearing away the hooded robe's surface, reached under his arm, and drew death knell. Although in Mr. X's current state where just air bullets alone could finish him off, Klein decided to be cautious. He was afraid that certain mystical items on his body would suddenly be triggered, just like Admiral of Blood Seigneur's necklace. When hunting, it was necessary to do his best. Klein's vigorous action of drawing his revolver had obviously affected his control of the spirit body threads. If it wasn't because Mr. X was on the brink of being fully controlled, just this alone was enough to recover his usual lucidness. However, even so, Mr. X's thoughts were no longer impeded as his mind sped up. He attempted to resist, but with Wraith Seigneurs possessing him, it had forced his efforts to be in vain for a brief moment. Then, Mr. X's eyes reflected an enemy who swooped downward. It was a thin face with pronounced facial lines. In his vision, the person coldly cocked the revolver, pointing the black barrel at him. Bang! Klein didn't hesitate to pull the trigger as the gunshot was drowned by the howling winds. Mr. X's head jerked backwards as though an invisible hand had pressed onto it. His head and brass mask shattered into pieces, splattering red and white liquids everywhere. It was a lethal shot. Death knell had sounded the knell for him. Plop! After the shot, Klein fell to the ground on his back. With a thud, Mr. X landed beside him as the blood and fragments that scattered in midair had strangely flowed back, gathering by his neck and forming a head filled with cracks and crevices. This was the ability of a wraith. At that moment, the hurricane was starting to disperse, and the huge commotion had undoubtedly caught the notice of faraway demigods. Inside the Holy Wind Cathedral, the new Backland Archbishop, deep blue officiant Randall Valentinus, instantly flew out of his room as he floated in the air. Klein, who had fallen on the ground, noticed that the wind pressure had weakened. With Death Knell in one hand and Laymanos' travels in the other, he flipped the latter to the first yellowish-brown goatskin page. After obtaining this spellbook, he realized that there were a few pages recorded in it, with one of them being Traveler's Door. Klein originally imagined that it was a coincidence, but on careful thought, he found it inevitable. This was because Laymanos' travels belonged to the ancient Abraham family. They wielded the apprentice pathway and several corresponding mystical items, so they had the resources to easily record a traveler's powers. After all, this was something very, very useful. At that moment, as long as the Traveler's Door was formed, Klein could leave unharmed with Mr. X's corpse that was being possessed by Wraith Seigneur. He hadn't used it in the building, because it was possible that the Aurora Order Saint might intercept it. Furthermore, Mr. X was also a traveler. He had a chance of successfully escaping via Traveler's Door. Therefore, Klein didn't dare risk it before he was completely dead. At that moment, Klein's vision went black as he realized that the surrounding streets were filled with a pitch-black and strange liquid. They surged over and quickly coagulated to form a strong cage. In such darkness, shadows began to come alive as cold gazes landed on him. A demigod's power. The Aurora Order does have a saint nearby. There's no way to directly teleport away. Klein's heart tensed up as he calmly flipped Laymanos Travels to the charred yellow page. Sizzle. A silver python snaked out of thin air, embroiling itself with the darkness as it illuminated everything. Lightning storm. The coagulated pitch blackness shattered instantly. And without any hesitation, Klein stuffed his death knell-wielding right hand into his pocket, pinching the dark green stone that was filled with burn marks. Door. He chanted in ancient Hermes with an abnormally calm tone. A light blue brilliance burst out as Klein's figure rapidly turned into a blur. Even Mr. X's corpse, which had come close to grab onto his shoulder, had experienced similar changes. The two figures instantly turned invisible as they vanished from the spot. They quickly departed into the spirit world with overlapping saturated colors, pulling off an ingenious escape. In the shadowy alley with the flattened gathering building which had planks, rubble, clothes, and all kinds of random items strewn all around, someone harumphed. Damn it. At this moment, the other gathering members had already fled the street. From far away in the sky, a sonic boom could be heard. Zio and Furs, who were searching for ghosts in East Borough, were alarmed by the sky that suddenly lit up. They hurriedly looked into the distance and saw the silver forest that seemed to bloom like a forest. The twisted form and sense of horror had left them trembling despite the distance. They didn't even dare look straight at it. What happened over there? Zio mumbled as she exchanged looks with Furs blankly. Furs actually had a guess, but she found it difficult to believe. This was because it had far exceeded her expectations of the world Gehrman Sparrow's strength. In a dark alley, Klein appeared out of thin air with Mr. X's corpse as they landed on the ground. He wasn't flustered at all. He kept Death Knell in his pocket and then took out another book. Grozel's Travels. Smack. Klein smacked the book written by Dragon of Imagination inkwelt onto Mr. X's face, staining the cover with blood. Moments later, Mr. X's corpse vanished, leaving behind Wraith Seigneur in his dark red coat and old triangular hat. Right on the heels of that, Klein put away Grozel's Travels, flipped open Laymanos Travels and made another charred yellow page face up. Suddenly, a bright light emitted from the book as an illusory angel with 12 wings flew up and landed on Klein. All of this happened in an instant before darkness returned to the alley. Only the dim moonlight continued illuminating the area silently. Klein immediately took out another metal bottle, poured out the blood stored inside, and uniformly smeared it across Laymanos Travels. After doing all of this, he put away everything else, pulling away the hooded robe and throwing it beside him. A scarlet flame immediately soared up, burning the tattered robe clean. Meanwhile, Klein silently grew another 10 centimeters as he transformed into a relatively ordinary appearance. Then, he identified his bearings with the help of the stars, and he picked up a fallen branch to assist him as he quickly toured through the dark and deteriorated streets, returning back to the cheap motel. At this point, he still had no idea what additional weakness he had been given. Inside the single room in the motel, Klein changed into his own clothes, turning back into Gehrman Sparrow. Seeing this thin and cold-looking crazy adventurer in the mirror, he fell silent for a few seconds, picking up the half-top hat and wearing it. Above the flattened building, Church of Storms Cardinal, Backlund Diocese Archbishop, Deep Blue Officiant Randall Valentinus, who had failed in capturing anyone, looked down in silence for an extended period of time. 160 Backlund Street. Upon seeing the visitor outside, Butler Walter asked in surprise, "Your Excellency, why are you suddenly here? Is there something?" Bishop Electra chuckled and said, I heard that Dwayne is sick, so I'm here to visit him. Perhaps he will quickly recover under the goddess's blessings. Walter came to the third story and rapped on the master bedroom's door. Who is it? Dwayne Dante's slightly weak and hoarse voice sounded. Walter turned the doorknob, opening a tiny crack in the door. Sir, Bishop Electra is here to visit you. Do you wish to meet him in the living room or activity room, or should he be invited directly to your bedroom? Usually, visitors weren't permitted to enter the master's bedroom. This was rather impolite, but visiting the sick was an exception. After a brief silence, Dwayne Dantes replied, invite him into the bedroom. All right, sir. As Walter gestured Richardson to urge a maid to prepare some tea, he walked down and invited Bishop Electra of the Church of Evernight up. Soon, Electra entered the bedroom and saw Dwayne Dantes lying in bed, looking haggard. Richardson, get the bishop a seat, the pale Dwayne Dantes said with a smile. Richardson had already done so. He immediately moved a high-backed chair to a spot near the bed. However, Electra took a few steps forward to observe the new tycoon in town and asked in concern, Dwayne, how are you? Did you consult a physician? His spiritual perception wasn't triggered, so he didn't make any attempts. He was only visiting a pious believer out of concern. Dwayne Dantes coughed lightly and smiled. I'm actually almost recovered. I believe I'll be able to head over to church tomorrow or the day after tomorrow to listen to your preachings. That's good. I was wondering if I needed to pray to Goddess to bless you. Electra chuckled and took a step back before sitting on the chair which Richardson had brought for him. At this moment, Dwayne Dantes glanced at the bishop and chuckled. Actually, I've always had a question. Are clergymen of the Church of the Goddess allowed to get married? Electra, who was 2 years short of reaching 40, sighed and smiled. This question has actually troubled us for the longest time. In ancient times, the archbishops had engaged in intense debates about this on several theosophical meetings. One side believed that servants of the goddess need to maintain their purity, be it men or women, otherwise it would be sacrilegious. The other side found words from the goddess in the revelation of Evernight and other books, believing that the goddess encouraged marriage. She encouraged equality between both sexes and for them to have normal contact. Hence, clergymen should be an example of this, and not be a negative example. By doing so, that would be the greatest respect towards the goddess. In recent times, this question has basically been shelved. The church doesn't ban or encourage it. The only request is that married clergymen are not to let their families live in the cathedrals. Dwayne Dantes nodded slowly as he curled the corner of his lips. Your Excellency, do you have a wife? Although Bishop Electra was thin and not very good-looking, he was pleasant to the eyes. He sighed and said, hardly hiding his smile, 2 years ago, I walked down the aisle under the goddess's watch. I happened to have a child this year. I originally imagined that I would remain single my entire life in order to serve Goddess, but... As he spoke, he gave a self-deprecating laugh and shook his head. Without waiting for Dwayne Dantes to probe deeper, Electra asked, you seem to be single as well. Are you considering the problem of marriage? He seemed to imagine that Dwayne Dantes had such thoughts, and he directly asked, imagining that the answer was certain as he continued, what kind of lady do you like? Perhaps I might be able to help introduce you to someone. Dwayne Dantes coughed lightly and said with a smile, I often chose adventures to amass wealth in the past, so I wasn't willing to get married, afraid I would drag her down. I like many types of women and am not picky. I like those older than me, ones who can give me warmth and make me feel at ease. Before he finished, his valet, Richardson, wore a stunned expression. He hurriedly turned his head aside and lowered it. He felt his face burning for some baffling reason. Dwayne Dantes didn't seem to sense it as he continued, I also like those younger than me, those who are pure and lively, making anyone who sees them feel as though it's dawn because of the radiance they aren't aware of. Bishop Electra's face suddenly froze as he raised his palm and clenched it into a fist as he held it to his mouth and coughed twice. Yet, Dwayne Dantes didn't stop. He shook his head and said with a sigh, I also like those who were once in love or were married so that people wouldn't dare approach due to their status, women who can only be viewed from afar. They are so charming that each action of theirs are so intoxicating and irresistible. I often dream. Butler Walter, who was standing nearby, trembled. He felt as though he had experienced a dream that he didn't wish to wake up from despite opposing it greatly. He had no idea if it was a good or bad dream. Dwayne Dantes was about to continue to describe further, but he stopped producing any sound after opening his mouth. He then chuckled softly. That's all very normal. When humans are at their limits and are under the influence of their senses, they often have some abnormal thoughts. As long as they're repressed while acting in line with one's will, it wouldn't feel like torture. One would still be a husband, a good father, a good man. That's very reasonable. When I'm incensed, I often have irrational thoughts, but few people will turn them into reality. Bishop Electra ingeniously changed the subject. As for Butler Walter and Valet Richardson, they revealed looks of contemplation. The bishop didn't stay long. After drinking a few sips of the marquis black tea that the maid delivered, he got up and bade farewell, leaving Dwayne Dantes' residence. The room quickly turned quiet as the window at the balcony silently opened. Klein, who had changed back into Dwayne Dantes, agilely leaped inside. Thankfully, I returned in time. If I allowed Rhodes to continue speaking, Bishop Electra would probably renounce a pious believer like me. Perhaps I'll even discover Walter and Richardson hanging from their rooms tomorrow morning, and the streets would have rumors of Dwayne Dantes being a pervert. Klein looked at the fake Dwayne on the bed and sighed silently. That final response had been personally formulated by him, and he got Rhodes to read it. Of course, this was his contingency plan for the worst possible scenario. He had believed that Rhodes wouldn't have made this situation develop that far. Welcome back, great master. The Dwayne Dantes in bed bowed and greeted. Did your loyal and humble servant, Rhodes, do well? Hearing the mirror stammer the question, Klein sighed and said, It's still all right. You did pretty good. However, try not to agitate others when chatting. I will take note. The fake Dwayne Dantes rapidly vanished as a small mirror appeared on the pillow. Above the mirror, silver light bloomed as words appeared. Thank you for your affirmation. I will continue following in your footsteps. I look forward to being of service to you the next time. After a goodbye expression was sketched out, the mirror returned to normal. Klein went close to it and put away the mirror before entering the bathroom attached to the master bedroom. He took 4 steps counterclockwise and headed above the gray fog. He wanted to complete the grazing before Mr. X's spirit body dispersed. In the book world, inside a cave on a snow-laden mountain peak. Klein looked at Mr. X's corpse and carefully identified the head that had been pieced together from the fragments. He matched it with his memories of the target's picture which Miss Magician had provided him. It's him. I hope I'll obtain traveling and record. With them, I would make a killing with this operation. Otherwise, I'll have to consider getting Miss Magician to pay more. The difficulty between hunting a sequence 5 and that of facing a demigod are 2 completely different matters. As Klein thought, he reached out his left palm and spread open his fingers, aiming at the corpse whose spirituality hadn't completely dispersed. Creeping hunger quickly transformed back into its original form, looking as though it was made of thin human skin. 2 eyes split open in the middle of its palm. Its pupils were bright red, as though they were dyed in blood. Amidst a cold and eerie wind, Mr. X's significantly dispersed spirit body and the resplendent beyonder specks of light that resembled the Milky Way drilled into Creeping Hunger, fixing onto a blank finger. Creeping Hunger first turned transparent as if it was a shadow of the spirit world before returning to normal. Klein closed his eyes and sensed it as his brows gradually eased. A smile surfaced on his face. His luck was pretty good this time because he had drawn one of the beyonder powers he wanted the most, Traveler's Door. It could also be called Door of Teleportation, or traveling. Its effect was to allow a person to traverse the spirit world while sensing the external world. Beyonders of different sequences could endure traveling for different periods of time due to the differences in their spirit body's potency. This made the effects of spirit world traversal and the distance differ. If it's a sequence 9 or 8, they wouldn't be able to go beyond Backland. With my present level, I wonder if I can directly head to the primitive island which Mr. Hanged Man provided. If that doesn't work, I can split it into a few trips. Klein thought as he smiled. At this point, he realized that a traveler's strength in head-on combat was very powerful. This was because the difficulty in using short-distance traveling was about the same as flaming jump. This also meant that a traveler could keep phasing around a target, opening up and narrowing distances as they pleased. This would catch people by surprise while also preventing them from inflicting a successful blow. Furthermore, if plenty of powers were recorded and the vigilance that accompanies immediately departing once something felt amiss, Klein suspected that even with lightning storm and hurricane, he had no way of restraining a traveler in direct combat. Indeed, a marionettist should try to hide behind the shadows. As Klein thought poignantly, he cast his eyes on Mr. X's corpse. Creeping hunger had also obtained another Beyonder power. It was door opening of the apprentice sequence. It was equivalent to a very weakened version of traveling and was of little value. Turning his gaze, Klein's eye noticed the ruby ring on Mr. X's hand.